So since we're using recording equipment, you really need to use your mic and you need to speak up because this is a big room.
Correct.
No.
Thank you.
Melanie?
Melanie O'Kane, Council Member, Position 1, and I'm really delighted to be here today with you, and thank you for coming and joining us. I have 2 children in North Shore Public Schools right now. My son attends Kenmore Middle School, and my daughter's a sophomore at Inglemoor High School. So, thank you. And I went to Inglemoor High School myself, so.
I'm Joe, another Viking, and my kids they're both Colts, though, right now.
On. Okay, I'm Sandy Hayes, North Shore School Board. I am actually very happy to say that I am not the president anymore. Bob Swain has graciously taken on that duty. I am a Kirkland City resident, so apologies, but my children also are, all 3 of them are Inglemoor Vikings, so.
Thank you. Jackie McGurty. This is now my 3rd year on the school board. I also have 2 kids. Unfortunately, they did not go through North Shore, and they are way out of school. But I'm really happy to be here, too.
Oh, here we go. Amy Cast, and I'm so happy to be here as well. I agree with you, Mayor Baker. I love these meetings. I think they're extremely helpful, and I love to hear all the details about what you guys have going on, too. We are not Vikings in my household. We are Falcons. I apologize.
Milton Curtis. I've been on the council for 12 years and just starting my 4th term.
I'm Bob Swains, North Shore School Board. I'm a Kenmore resident. Live right up by Inglemoor High School, and the youngest of my 3 kids just graduated last year.
I think mine's
And I'm Rob Carlindsey, City Manager, and I have 2 Vikings right now.
Michelle Reed, Superintendent, no Vikings. All 4 of our kids are through school and school, so good to be here.
All right. Let's go ahead and start with what's on the screen up there. Dr. Reed.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. This is our Summer Administrative Institute from this summer. I guess I'll speak into the mic, from this summer. And we have some film footage of our 4 regions. We have split the district into regions since we've grown so quickly. So each region and then the district office had a boat. We're still discussing the outcome, the results. So suffice it to say the district did not have the winning boat. I believe the West region won, which would be the Bothell High School region. But it was a fabulous team building activity, and Mayor Baker, many thanks to your wife, Sherry. Is she here?
He's out there.
All right, woohoo, thank you, Mrs. Baker, and Koichi and Fong, and it just was a fabulous team building. We're really hopeful we could maybe do it again. One of the teams at least will practice. And we're also looking forward to including dragon boat racing in our 4 high schools, comprehensive high schools. So that's the next step. I know Dugan Harmon, our deputy superintendent, met with Koichi and Fong and Sherry as well recently. So we're really hopeful that catches on in our comprehensive high schools. The sport, I've learned a lot about dragon boat racing, and it really exemplifies the character traits and sportsmanship that we want to exemplify, I think, in North Shore. And to that end, if you can ignore the wrapping, we're on a budget. We wanted to present you with a thank you picture from the race so you guys could put up, and just wanted to say thank you for all the time and effort you put in.
We will certainly come into play for that. And I'll tell you what, that finish there looks really too close to call.
Well, thank you.
Depends on the angle that you're on.
That's
because,
what I've been saying, right? Yeah, that's exactly what I've been saying for about 6 months. Anyhow, it was just fabulous and a nice example of a partnership, and so, thank you.
Well, I certainly love the idea of the high school getting a dragon boat program because your students are forward-thinking and forward-moving.
Oh, nice.
And we
Nice.
like the paddlers that go forward. So.
We do. Well, also, you know, we had a spot for everyone, right, in the boat. So it was really a fabulous event.
Mr. Carlinzy. Oh, no, yes.
Yes.
High school rowing program and shell house update.
All right. Yeah, another thing that we're doing to connect our kids with the water is the new rowing program. And the high school's actually been providing a high school rowing program for a couple of seasons now. They've been doing it just on the lawn at Logboom Park, and we've been working to actually get them a roof over their heads. And the plan is coming together. We were able to get some county money and some state money and a little bit of school district money to help us fund the construction of this shell house that you see here. Here's some different angles of it. Right there at Rhododendron Park, right next to the Sammamish River Bridge on the south side. So it's directly opposite the lakeside boathouse. So we just opened bids for the construction of this shell house just last week. Surprise, surprise, the bids came in a little high. So we're going to be talking to the council about what to do about that. What the hope is that we can give the green light to the contractor to get under construction, and it'll take not quite a year to get this thing built, but hopefully it'll be open for spring season in 2021. So it's going to be a really nice addition to our waterfront. Here's an interior view, and it's actually going to have a mezzanine up above if we can afford it. But we'll have to figure out if, because one of the bid alternates allows us to not have a mezzanine if we need to save a little bit of money. But it'll have an accessible lift that'll take people up there, and there'll be room enough to do ergs up there on the mezzanine. Plus, it'll have restrooms and some other things. So, yeah, we're excited about this partnership with the school district. It'll require an arrangement where we have a lease agreement with the school district, and then the school district would have an operating agreement with a nonprofit like the George Pocock Rowing Foundation to actually run the programs and manage the space and things like that. So pretty excited about this partnership.
We are too. We're going to do a reset of our five-year window to a national championship.
That's right.
Right.
Yes, we did a reset. You have a full 5 years from now.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see, Aquatic Center.
Yeah, this is something that several of our city council members have been wanting to talk about, and we briefly talked about it last time we met as a joint city council and school board. I think people definitely see the need for an aquatic center, especially since we have, you know, the 4 high schools in the district and no aquatic center. We recently surveyed our citizens. We did a statistically valid random survey, and we definitely heard people say we would like a decent place to have our kids learn how to swim and things like that. So these things aren't cheap. They're really expensive to build, and nowadays I think if you're not a large city, I think you need to have some sort of a coalition of cities or governmental entities to make something like that happen. So we don't have any magic solution or grand plan on how to do it, but we want to keep the conversation going, and we're hoping that you all do too. Mainly just want to open it up and get thoughts on what next steps might be, how to get the ball rolling on something like this.
I know Councilmember Marshall has been active with this on the North Shore Parks and Recreation Board. And we've started, and actually there's been talks going on for a number of years. There was even a study done a number of years ago. And it's something that the cities are just not capable of doing their own. I know the one that Shoreline is looking at doing is about an $80 million project. And there are those that say that if you're going to do one, you need to have an aquatic center that have a wave pool and all this other stuff along with the competition pools and everything. So there's a lot of thought that's going to need to go into this. Going to be a lot of strong partnerships that are needed. Three cities are going to have to get together, and we're going to have to come to the school board, I guess, who's going to be the biggest user of it. So, Joe, have you got any thoughts on this?
Of course. Thank you for that summary. I mean, that's pretty much it from my perspective, is a coalition, or the absolute necessity for a coalition, and then that we probably have no better time than right now with at least 5 entities that could potentially look at funding this. It's the 3 cities plus North Shore Parks and Recreation Service Area and the district. Everybody wants the same end, and I can't help but emphasize, we did it back in whenever the Bothell and North Shore Pool was originally constructed, back in '72 or thereabouts, somewhere like that, when we didn't have the big money that we have now, when we didn't have the wealth that we have now. And we've got great program activities like the rowing and crew and the dragon boats, and we're really, I think, obligated to try and teach our kids to swim and step back up to what our forebears did in teaching our kids to swim and getting in there. So I just agree with, certainly with trying to keep the conversation going. And my ask tonight would be if we could at least leave the meeting, unless everybody has, I'm sure everybody have better ideas than me, but leave the meeting with direction to respective staffs to at least discuss and see if anything further concrete can come out of it. Thank you.
I'm not looking for any positions. I'm not looking for any commitments, but it would be nice to hear the school board's initial thoughts.
Councilmember Schreck.
Because I know you've talked about this
Sure, we've
before.
Yeah.
Because you got the school programs that are slowly but surely disappearing, so.
Well, it's been talked about for a long time in this community. I mean, I remember our kids were younger, we used to go up to St. Edwards and swim, take them there, or Juanita Pool, because those were the options if you lived in the area, really, or Mount Lake Terrace, maybe, for swimming lessons. I mean, we know as the programs we provide specifically are for our swim teams. We have varsity sports, varsity swim teams, men and women, that we don't have facilities for them to participate in, and they're scattered all over in our community pools, and I don't even think we're back at Juanita anymore. They kicked us out of there, I think, last year, but are we back now? Have they reopened? Okay. So, and my daughter swam on the swim team and for a year, but then she decided, or half a year, and then she kept complaining that she was falling asleep every day in class because she had to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning. And that's not fair to ask our kids to do that. So we totally are supportive of a pool, and we know we need to have one. I mean, the communities need to have one. The question is whether it's I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on demand, because there's demand at the school district level, and then there's also broad community demand. And I don't know if you have an idea of where people are getting their kids swimming lessons now. I guess it's probably at one of the pools is no longer, but I guess the people are just finding.
Would it be all right if we clarified that we as a board have not had this conversation about a pool? That certainly individuals, and I know that we were all contacted by members of the Kenmore City Council in the last couple of days, but we have not had this opportunity to have this conversation, and so I just wanted to clarify.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And my intention is not to put you on the spot.
North Shore board position,
To sort of start a discussion.
Yeah, it's been kind of informal, and we hear from community people, and But we haven't even looked at numbers of what a pool would cost to build. So,
If I might, I think it would be helpful perhaps if City Manager Carlindsey could share the survey information that you have with Superintendent Reed. You know, we have, every 4 years, we have a capital projects task force that looks at the overall capital needs of the school district, especially since we've had to respond to growth over the last decade or two. We've been growing by the equivalent of an elementary school every year, and that's frankly been our priority. But we're just about ready to start that 4-year cycle again to study the needs of what we have facing. And so this timing might be very good. We have a process in place to process these kind of questions. And we were talking as a board that it's about ready to start getting that going again here this spring, summer. So the timing is very good. So any information, and from the parks, I don't think we have much visibility to the Parks District and what conversations happen there too. So we'd appreciate any information there too that we could put into our process. For sure.
Councilmember Shrubnik, do you have anything you want to add?
Just a old person's historic perspective. That my year at Inglemoor, when I was a Viking, Candy Costi also graduated, and of course she and Tracy Ruiz, who went to Bothell High School, were Olympians in swimming, and actually, and so I just remember that history, and I think it's an important piece of what our community is about. And of course we have Aqua Club, which is a private club, but they also very prominent on the private swim club world around Puget Sound. And so there's certainly a lot of families in these communities that are swimmers and divers, and I don't know, I think it would be not only beneficial for the kids in school to be able to have a place to go that's not at 5 in the morning or 4:30 in the morning, but also for the broader community. And I don't know how those pieces come together, what the model is in terms of shared, finances. And I mean, I guess I would be open to just, exploring what that might look like. I don't know what that could look like, but it seems like there's a need on both sides.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from here is that we're open. We want to work with you if that's the direction you decide to go. We're not trying to force you in any direction or not, but we just want to know that we're here and we'll be part of the conversation if you want us to. And so any information we can get for you, we'll be happy to supply. But I'm not twisting your arm. I'm not doing it. It's just, we're here if you need us.
Right. And if I could just ask one more clarifying question. So we've also heard from Woodinville and Bothell City Councils about this as well. In fact, James McNeil at Bothell has been thinking of some plans too. I don't know how much coordination you all have had time to do with them as well, or is that part of this initial conversation?
We're very, very familiar with what Councilmember McNeil is doing. His push right now is over on the Bothell-Woodinville Highway, the old tennis court facility and that. And, in some respects, that may work well for Bothell, but I think for the rest of the area west of the district, it's pretty far on the fringe. But again, I don't want to get into picking where the site's going to be. We're open to all the discussion. And, we're open to the discussions.
And just very briefly, I think the PROS plan, or our PROS plan, or the park survey that our city manager referred to, put the councilmember or board member Swain had asked about the demand. So at least in Kenmore, I think the Aquatic Center by some aspects of the PROS plan was near the top of community desires and needs for the city of Kenmore. So that's for sure. And then I do know that Councilmember McNeil did have an idea, but I don't know if he was totally ready to go with it. It was just more of a brainstorm of certain locations that are closer, more centrally located. So those might work too.
Yeah.
Very recent.
Yeah. My thoughts were just going back to what I was saying about demand is, do we have more demand than we can provide? I mean, because a lot of areas and a lot of states will have municipal pools to work with, the smaller kids and school, swimming classes and all, and it's a different type of facility. So I'm just thinking, it'd be interesting to know where parents are now getting the swimming lessons, and I know it's not adequate, but is it providing the service, or is it not? It's just part of the overall discussion of what we really need and where we need it.
So,
Yes, Dr. Curtis.
So just to comment, so I'm a grandpa for 9 grandkids, and for Christmas, we give things like swimming lessons. And so the Linwood Pool is where our grandkids are learning.
So tomorrow is a big election day for bonds and levies for the school districts around the state. So we're watching those very closely. And there are 2 districts near us, Emmons and Bellevue, that are running very large bonds. So we're watching those closely. We're also watching Sumner, which is running a bond with a swimming pool in it, that they operate jointly with the city of Sumner. So my question then is what research have you done on how this is working with the joint partnerships with districts and cities around the state? Like I said, when I was given the heads up that this was coming, I was at a statewide event involving school districts from around the state, and when I started asking, it was a little concerning what I was hearing. So I was wondering what data you guys have of how that's working, where it's being successful, some models that we can be looking at of how to do this in a way where we aren't, Mercer Island, for example, is $125,000 loss each year to the Mercer Island School District for their joint partnership. In my mind, that's 2 mental health counselors. We lose more kids to suicide in this state than drowning. So, what have you found? Where's it working? What can we look at to say, yeah, that's a model we can replicate?
I don't personally have any models. I just know that the North Shore area has worked well together on a number of things. I do not know any municipal school board or school district partnerships that are floating around. I know that the county with Forward Thrust a number of years ago built a lot of pools, but they're pretty much all gone now. And I know that the maintenance cost for cities is just something that most cities can't bear any longer. And I think Montlake Terrace pools, I don't know how much longer they'll be in existence. It's just too expensive for a small community. So if we're going to do this, it's got to be a partnership. It's got to be a well-thought-out partnership, and it's got to be something that we're all committed to. Otherwise, it just won't work.
So it sounds like that's a good next step, is for somebody to take on doing that research of figuring out where it is successful so that we can kind of do some modeling along that line.
That's a good idea. And Joe, you're our representative, so
That's right.
we will task you.
And I ideally like to have a citizen coalition, which I have some experience in forming same, but we have able staff as well, so it'd be great to see that. But we should work on that for discussion, and then I love the idea of the cycle coming up for the bonds and levies, et cetera.
I think that's one thing we got to be careful of, though, as staff, because staff time is a precious commodity. We got our work plan done for the year, and we need to be very cognizant of staff and tying them up too much. So, anything else on the pool?
One little question.
Sure.
And this is just my ignorance. So a pool for kids who are on swim team, is that normally sited at a school, or can it be elsewhere and the kids can come to it? I don't know the answer to that.
We'll travel anywhere to a swimming pool.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we can be a long-term lessee on a swimming pool. Yeah.
All right. Should we move on? School athletic field, some potential for city-district partnership.
Yeah, so the city of Kenmore owns one ball field, and it's the one that we share with Morelands Elementary. We own it, but we share it with the school district, and we have a pretty good arrangement that we just refreshed a year or two ago, and I think it's working okay. And we just renovated that ball field and made it more playable. But compared to other cities around us, we're lacking when it comes to athletic fields, and our different sports teams definitely can attest to that. The City Council just recently decided to not continue pursuing the St. Edward ball field renovation. And over the last year or two, at a staff level, we've been talking to the school district about some potential partnerships where school district athletic fields get improved. So when it comes to improving a field, there's improving the playing experience, and then there's improving capacity. And I think if we were to pursue something with the school district, if there's interest on the school district's part, we would definitely want to do both. I think capacity is an issue, and right now our sports teams do schedule school district ball fields for practices. A lot of your ball fields are not game quality. They're okay for practices, but they're not game quality for like on Saturday games and things like that. So there's some additional capacity that could be achieved if elementary school or other school ball fields were converted from into game quality type fields, so you could have some additional ability to actually schedule games in Kenmore. So again, we've talked to Joe Paperman and Michelle's staff about that a little bit, but just wanted to bring that up and gauge interest. And you probably haven't talked about it, I'm sure, as a school board, but I'd love to open it up and get some thoughts.
I know one of the things that I am a little concerned about is that not too long ago, we had 30 Little League teams in Kenmore residents. We now have 50. And there is a growth in young families in Kenmore as more of the seniors move out. So it's something that if there's a way to do something, we'd sure love to talk about it. Councilmember Marshall.
I think I can assure you that the feeling of the council in general was a definite support for Little League baseball fields with our last vote, and there was certainly a real sense of commitment to approaching the district about, okay, how can we, the city of Kenmore, contribute? And I mean, I think that's obviously financially to improving Kenmore middle school fields, Kenmore elementary, whatever the necessary sites are in what capacity to improve capacity and playability. The need is definitely there, and everybody really felt strongly about that. I think it's safe to say. So I would totally ask then for that this be one where we definitely leave tonight with a working item for the respective staff to say, okay, can we identify how do we start the conversation about what type of improvements and where?
Your Honor.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's definitely a need. I also want to kind of bring us back to the stark reality of dollars. Our capital projects are coming in higher than anticipated. Our bridge that we just opened bids on in December came in significantly higher. We had to scour our capital improvement program to come up with the money to pay for the bridge replacement. So the stark reality is we don't have any money now in our CIP for ball fields. We have yet to open the bids on our walkways and waterways projects. We're going to be going out to bid for Juanita and 68th Avenue probably in March or April. And if the past is any indication of the future, those bids are going to come in high. So just For our 6-year CIP, for the 6-year horizon, there's no money for athletic fields. Can you apply for grants? Yes, you can, but they usually require matches, and RCO only funds at like $500,000. You can also get a youth athletic field grant for $250,000, so the most you can expect from the state RCO account is about $750,000 for a ball field. Plus you got to match it. Plus you got to have a strong case because they're very competitive. So I'm just trying to ground us all here in reality. Don't want to kill the dream, though. I think it's an important dream to have, especially given the need.
Yeah, so again, we want to open the dialogue. We want to see if there's some common ground there. Councilmember File.
Just to build off of what Rob Carlinzi was saying, there are some regional grants available with Dow Constantine's budget and the King County budget, flexible grants. I think if we work a collaborative, creative approach, like an innovative approach like Senator Frost had once worked with our school district, our region, and city of Kenmore, we might be able to come to a place where we can improve ball fields at our local schools. And whether it's enhancing with lights and helping with a safe playground, restoration, so that there can be increased usage, that would be something that I think that would benefit everyone. I do know that the past concerns around Morelands was concerns really about the lack of a fence line and signage for public use, and to delineate the safe space and zone for kids in schools. So we don't want people navigating into the school space during school time. Of course, I think that we can come together with joint efforts and even maybe working with our local area nonprofits to help be part of that solution. But I think that we have real opportunities here in Kenmore to help improve Kenmore Elementary or Morelands, a playground up there with lights, or even Kenmore Middle School. There's one question I do have, is that we did hear a little bit of feedback from Little League saying that there was less use of fields within the district on Sundays. Is this a contract issue with the service staff for not being able to access ball fields on Sundays? Or is there a first come, first serve kind of issue with who services the field?
I would have to check into that. When you say there's less use, you mean there's less availability that folks are finding?
They were saying that there isn't Sunday availability. And I don't know what the reason is around that, but I do know, sometimes service contracts with the district and your unions might be part of the issue if it's a staff first offer of refusal or right to accept. I think we can still work around those things and create yet another solution if that is.
Yeah, I would have to check on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Councilmember O'Kane.
This is a question for City Manager Rob Carlinzi. Related to the budget issues that you brought up, which did have an impact on St. Edward's, we also had the environmental concerns, which were actually probably the heaviest concern with that location. My question related to the budget is, in our 6-year CIP, if we were able to come into a partnership with North Shore School District, would we possibly be able to prioritize ball fields to get funds towards fields more timely? We definitely have a need. We have a community that came out. We had 40 people speak last week at our council meeting on both sides of the issue, but both sides were advocating for us to work with North Shore School District to become partners in developing fields. And so it's our sincerest hope that we can work together. And I, as a council member, would be very open to working with city management and the council, North Shore School District, but with our council, to see what we can do to find funding to work with you to increase our recreational field capacity, because we don't have it, but there are fields that can be improved within the district at a much lower expense than what we were looking at, and with options that are more accessible to all of our students, to our entire community. There were access issues at St. Edward's, traffic issues, parking issues, where schools do have capacity to meet those needs that our former option wasn't able to fulfill. So I'm genuinely hopeful we might be able to work together on this. So thank you.
Yeah, Amy.
I just want to follow up with that, Councilmember O'Kane. So when you say, because we don't know what you were looking at with the St. Edward's situation, and so if you don't mind clarifying a little bit, obviously the cost is something that we'd be interested to hear about, but you mentioned something about it would be lower cost to, if I heard you correctly, lower cost to develop the school district ball fields in St. Edward's, and we are not familiar with the St. Edward's situation, so that's a little...
I can share a bit about that. The St. Edward's Field, because of its environmental wetlands concerns, due to the drainage and engineering required to make this happen, the total cost was incredibly high, up to $7 million for a full lighted field. So $5 million for drainage for a grass field, no lights. So it's incredibly expensive. We have looked at, or I have received information related to other districts partnering with cities, such as Lake Washington School District partnering with the city of Kirkland, where they've been able to work together and provide enhancements to current fields. So it really would depend on the scale. The most expensive similar field enhancement was in Sammamish. That was a $1.3 million project. So when we're looking at cost, looking at an existing field in a more suitable location with fewer environmental concerns, which I do know some of our fields may actually have environmental concerns and be prohibitive, but possibly Kenmore Middle School might be a really prime candidate for expanding capacity, particularly this time of year when it's dark so early, and students, ball players, lacrosse kids, they're already practicing, and it gets dark early. So we're really curious to see what we can do to move forward and work with the district, because we do see opportunity, and it feels like our community can see opportunity too. And it's really, the benefit of working with the schools is we have kids that will be able to use those for PE during the day, possibly improve after-school activities for our students. So there's a great potential there, and thank you for asking those. Did I answer all of your questions? Thank you.
Okay, so sorry, this is our code within ourselves that we're ready to talk.
Use it in a number of meetings too.
Okay. So first of all, good news to Councilmember File. We just got an update at our meeting just a few hours ago that lights have been replaced at many of our sports fields that are LED, and even to the extent that our lovely Osprey has returned. So we have improved our lighting and in an environmentally friendly way. So kind of a broken record here. This is not a conversation we've had as a board, so can't really speak on behalf of the board, field specific. But I can say with the conversations we have been having is as we become more of an urban area, in fact, Director Katz and I were just down in Olympia today speaking with our members of the legislators. What does a school need and look like in the second half of the 21st century, right? What are common necessities? What do outdoor spaces look like? And how do we create a smaller footprint for a school as the schools get bigger? I mean, Port Morelands is kind of our canary in the coal mine in this area, right? So that is where our conversation is, and we are in talks about putting together a strategic plan for capital projects. And so this is, fortunately not a next month or even next year solution, but it is absolutely a conversation we want to be having with our community of what is the input and what are the values, and how do we do that in the world that we are currently living in, because as you know, there's no space to build more schools in our area, and yet Amazon is adding 15,000 jobs, and here they come. So that I can tell you that is a conversation we have been having.
I think also what would be helpful is for some sort of understanding with the Little League. For instance, the Little League bought tractors and chains to drag a field up at Kenmore Middle School because it's in pretty bad shape. And they invested the equipment, they invested the time necessary, or want to, but they're basically told they can't. And so there's little things that I think with further discussion might be able to work out with no money on either one of our sides. Because the Little League is very interested in doing it. It's just getting through the necessary permissions and jumping through the necessary hoops to be able to make some of this stuff happen. I mean, you've got some really nice fields up there that certainly could be used, but right now, you get kids out there running and playing, it's a little too dangerous. So I think there's some things that if we could just talk, we might be able to work through. And I don't pretend to know any of the school's positions on anything. I just know what I've been told, and I just think it would be advantageous if we could talk. Councilmember Marshall.
And yeah, I want to invoke history again. We grew up here playing on the school fields. That's how the Little League functioned, and they were in great shape. I don't know what has happened in the last 30 years or so to have the fields deteriorate. I think as they objectively, I believe, have, as an historical observer would be able to see. But we're totally willing to, we want to step up and partner and help raise money to, and get together the money to help improve the fields as necessary. And maybe if there's even like some quicker project that could be done, like lights at a certain field, that's something I think we ought to step on. And then also there's, in a positive note, it could be framed, is an equity issue, say like even for Kenmore Elementary, a Title I school. There's opportunity for a wonderful field there to serve our low-income kids. And maybe then there are corresponding grants that is in the expertise of the school district to be able to tap into Title I type grants and all those great things. So I'm totally excited, and I would ask that we leave at least with an ask to, again, communicate specifically, or at least meet and have our staffs meet and talk about this.
So if I might, Mayor.
Yeah,
So absolutely appreciate that, Councilmember Marshall. And we do, obviously, with the Moorlands, the park next to Moorlands, there's a turf field at Canyon Park Middle School that was installed with the help of a community partnership. Please don't hear our hesitancy as a negative response. You know, perhaps a little context that would help you guys understand where we're coming from and why we need to put this into our process. So and perhaps maybe your remarks about the conditions of the fields. Our capital projects task force, every 4 years, they put together a list of requirements in the district, and we've only had the funds to fund a third of their requests. And our last capital bond only passed by 285 votes. You know, we have to have a supermajority in order to fulfill our capital needs. And so that's why we have to play so conservatively with our budget. And I have 3 children who all went through youth sports in the district. I think all of us can speak definitely towards the need and the strength that the programs provide to everyone in the community. But just I thought that context might be helpful so you can understand why we have created this process. It's not for lack of desire. It's just the reality that unfortunately we've been faced with again with growing as quickly as we have and trying to avoid us, having to use as many portables as we have had to make, our restrictions on capital have been pretty severe over the last decade. And so, absolutely. But again, this timing is good. You know, we're just about ready to start that process again. This timing is great. And we've have a history of successful partnerships when it comes to parks and playfields.
We understand you guys have got your agenda, you've got the things that you have to do as a school board. We're not trying to gang up on you, we're not trying to spring things on you, really not. We enjoy the relationship that we have with you guys, and we want to keep it strong, but we also need to tell you what we're thinking about in hearing. So I'm not looking to alter your schedule, just trying to get it on your radar. Councilmember File.
If I can leave us with one last thought on a partnership with ball fields, whether it's a public and private and nonprofit partnership. I know the school board recently decided to take a position on later start times and set a date and move forward. I think we are in a position in Kenmore where we need to respond to our community and we need to meet the needs of our communities. And it would be great if we could do so by also improving the lives of our children at our schools. And it would be great to be able to work forward on this together. So with that happy note, I'll stop.
We love Inglemoor. We love the students up there. I've had the opportunity to go up there and talk at one of the classes about government and about the comprehensive plan and stuff. And we get students coming in to our council meetings on a class assignment every Monday. And but I tell you what, I'm so proud of those kids. They're such an asset to our community. And high school is different than when I went. I mean, these kids at Inglemoor are they're really studying hard with all the programs, the IB program and stuff. I mean, it's pretty demanding. We've got a bunch of smart kids up there, I'll tell you, and we're all pretty proud of them. I guess that turns to the bond levy coming up. Dr. Reed.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. Rob and I talked a little bit about wanting to talk about our levy and bond cycle for the school district as it connected to the city's levy and bond cycle, so we're not all on the same cycle. And so just wanting to remind the city that we're going to be going out in February of 2022 for our next levy bond cycle in whatever form that takes. And a number of the topics we've talked about tonight obviously are going to be talked about prior to an agreement by the board on what to put on as a resolution on the ballot, which normally is done November-ish of the year before, which would be the fall of 2021. So we just wanted to throw that open and sort of pose the question, what are you all thinking as a city, and how do we make sure we work together so citizens aren't overburdened at any one time? We kind of, keep all of our projects or ideas flowing in a thoughtful way.
Now, I'm not making any commitments of the council, but historically, we've been very supportive of North Shore School District and your bond issues.
You guys have been great.
And so we will be eagerly awaiting what you guys come up with. We thank you for listening to us.
Absolutely.
And I know you'll keep us informed, and so that's one of the reasons for the meetings every year, so we know where you're going, and nothing is a big surprise. It's just so much better to work that way.
So on the city side, we don't have any plans to go to the voters. That said, many of you may know about our operating budget and how our cost of doing business is going up higher than the revenues are. So the city's embarked on a financial sustainability plan process, and we've appointed a task force of residents to help us with that. They've had one meeting so far. They're going to meet again tomorrow. And they're going to come up with kind of a menu of options on how the city can keep its financial lines from crossing. It is possible that they may recommend some sort of a ballot measure like a levee lid lift or something like that. Don't know. Too early to say for sure. But if they did, there could be a scenario where we go to the voters this November or sometime next year.
So I think part of the issue there is because the state limits us to a 1% property tax increase, and the cost of doing, I hate this word business because we're not a business, but the cost of operating is going up faster than that. And so we keep doing things and working on the budget. We keep those lines from crossing. And right now, they're supposed to cross in 2022. But frankly, when I took office in 2004, they were going to cross in 2007. And then in 7 came and they were going to cross in 2010. So maybe I'm like the kid who cries wolf too much. But I'm sure that we're going to work through this. But it's these state-imposed and federal-imposed mandates that are causing us big issues. And yeah, I know you are. And we just had a meeting with Rod Dembowski today. And I won't use the words he used, but you guys did not come out well with the state and the allocation of funds and stuff that they did under McCleary. So we know the pain. And we know about these unfunded mandates and stuff. So we are working with it. We have this task force. They're residents, and we're very hopeful. They're a group of very, very smart people. I think a lot of them were educated at Inglemoor, so I feel very confident. Anyway, shall we go to wrap up? City updates and district updates. So, as Rob touched on, well, I don't know if he's touched on this one, the West Sammamish Bridge, the southbound side, that was built 82 years ago in 1938. There a few years ago, bridges are rated from 1 to 100 in their strength, their capacity, and all of that. Sufficiency rating. I think ours was rated at a 2. It was rated worse than the Vancouver Bridge. We have since done things. It's now rated in the teens. It's perfectly safe. We've limited trucks going over in weight. So we have done a few things to prolong it. But we went out to bid here last fall. We opened the bids in December. We awarded a bid in January. Our first bid that we accepted was $5 million over budget. It turns out that the company was a little bit deficient on some of the minority programs that it offered and stuff for work with small business minorities. And we had to change to another bidder. This one was $6.5 million over budget. So as Rob said, we've been working and we're going to start construction here very soon. It's going to be a 3-year project. We're going to do the best we can to keep traffic moving, but it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a long 3 years, but the results will definitely be worth it. We're also going out to bid, as Rob mentioned, on Juanita Drive and 68th Street. Now, this is going to be going on the same time as the bridge is going on. That's going to be causing issues. So there's a lot of things that are going to be happening in the next 3 years. Traffic is not going to be pretty, but we're going to do our best to keep it moving over the bridge because, half of our city is over there. And half of our city, well, I've watched that traffic go from about 18,000 cars a day to now over 25,000 cars a day across that bridge. So we know the importance of it. And we're working and we're going to try to make it as palatable as possible. The Walkways and Waterways bond measure, that's part of it. The Juanita Drive and 68th Street, that's part of the bond issue that we did in 2016 that was approved by a substantial margin for our public. And like I said, we're going out to bid here very quickly on that one. We're anxiously awaiting what the results are going to be. But we're also got waterfront in there. We completed the walkways and the dock at Rhododendron Park, and we are, I think, about 30%, maybe more, on design on Squires. We're going to get an update on that tonight. And so we're moving forward. St. Edward Park, the lodge at St. Edward's. That started, I believe it was about 16, is when Parks gave them the approval to move forward on that. And they're scheduled to open this fall. So that's moving along nicely. So there will be some meeting space there. There'll be some restaurants there. It should be an exciting venture when it's finished. So the city council goes away every January and has a retreat. And we try to prioritize things in the city. We really try to concentrate on 5 top issues. And those five top issues at the end of the year is what our city manager gets evaluated on in his job performance. So we have always had environmental issues in our top 10, but this year we have moved a climate action plan up to number 3 on the list. So staff is tasked with looking at what we're already doing, looking at what we could do, and we're looking at what other cities do. Frankly, why reinvent the wheel? If somebody else is doing it, let's see if we can't use that for what we're doing or what we'd like to do. So that's a big task now for staff this next year, is to come up with a workable climate action plan that we can really try to make some significant inroads to in our community. Affordable housing, that's another huge issue here. Last year we took it on, and there was rants and raves in the Seattle Times, and there was actually a front page article done on what we did with our mobile home, our trailer parks here in town. We put some conditions on them. We said that 2 parks were going to stay senior and other ones had 10 years on them. And so we've been sued, and we're defending that because we believe we're fully right in trying to protect affordable housing in the community. We're also working hard to try to develop affordable housing, not only for the middle income, which is disappearing everywhere, but we're also very concerned with affordable housing down at the 50% median. And I'm personally very, very supportive of everything down to the 30% level, because people just starting out, 30% is about what they've got. 30% is a $15 an hour person working in a coffee shop. So I think that people shouldn't have to drive 50 miles to work, shouldn't have to spend 2 hours in traffic. I would love to see new teachers be able to afford housing by their school. That's something that hasn't been around for a while, and it's something that we feel very strongly about as a council, and it's something that we're working on. That's about it, I think. Well, one of the other things that we're doing, though, is we're also looking at ADUs, accessory dwelling units on properties. We're trying to expand those so that anybody that wants to build an ADU on their property can. We're also looking at smaller housing units in our single-family neighborhoods, like cottage housing, like duplexes. So we're trying to look at what we can do to sort of increase the stock of middle-income places and stop some of these McMansions that are going up around us everywhere. So anyway, that's pretty much what's going on in Kenmore. You got any updates on the school board for us? And that's fine. We know that you're getting ready to work on a bond levy, and that's going to be huge. That's going to take a lot of work. If you're going out in 2 years, you're going to be working on it about every meeting.
Yes.
Big
yes.
chore.
we were very busy, and it's all, as Director Hayes mentioned and Director Cass, it's all driven by growth, population growth. One of the big things that we did this year, and you've probably been tracking us, was our demographics task force and our demographer. We looked at all the numbers, and when we found out not too long ago, a few months back, that we were going to be out of space at our high schools. And we're going to have 650 more high school students, so we could fit in any of the schools. We don't have space, we don't have really space in any of our schools. So our choices were to build a giant portable farm, which I know our community loves portables, for, $8-10 million to have to put this someplace. And it's, they don't last forever, and they're not suitable really for culture in a school and all the other reasons that you know about. But so we had this opportunity to buy a what we call CP4, Canyon Park Building number 4 in the Canyon Park Business Park, which we purchased at a really good deal. It was AT&T call center. It's a 3-story, 65,000 square feet, somewhere around there, with an extra buildable lot on it, and that is now going to be our innovation lab high school, in which we are now doing, the principal that we hired is doing community outreach and explaining what we're trying to accomplish and to get feedback from teachers and students and families. And so we were able to, I think, make a really good economic decision by purchasing that building, which is fairly ready to move in. We have to do some TIs, of course, and some seismic upgrading and stuff. But it was a great, I think, creative use of our funds and taking advantage of an opportunity. Thanks to Dr. Reed and her staff that really uncovered this opportunity, and we supported her in moving forward with that. So that's going to help us, take care of this capacity and try some new things in education. So we were really excited about that, for sure. I think what else? That's been the thing we've been focusing on, besides all the...
I could follow up, President
and
Swain,
Ruby Bridges.
Ruby Bridges. Yes. I think I just want to mention, if some of you haven't heard, that Dr. Tony Wagner is coming tomorrow. He's going to be speaking at a public meeting tomorrow evening at 6:30 at the NPAC. And he's written a number of books. He's been head of the Harvard Innovation Lab for a number of years. But his most recent book was Creating Innovators. So he'll be speaking to the public and taking questions, explaining the why for this choice high school. So if you haven't heard him speak, he's spoken to the Governors Association in the past several months, also in Dubai to the global petroleum leaders around the world, Shenzhen in China with the drone and coding folks. So he really has an interesting background, and he'll be at the NPAC at 6:30, and I don't think he's been out to the West Coast very often, so it's really a treat to be able to come hear him. So.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of things going on. It's hard to keep track of them all. And then of course, we have Ruby Bridges Elementary School that will be opening this coming fall, which we're very excited about. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, that'll be an IB-based curriculum. So that is another creative opportunity that we're taking advantage of. Because what we want to do is change the format a little bit. We want to change what we've been doing for the decades, and we want to try different ways of delivering quality education. And when we see how these things go at the high school level and elementary school level, which is actually kind of interesting, we're doing it kind of both ends of the spectrum. But what really works, we tried some different things, and what's really working to help kids learn in a more constructive way, in a healthier way, and then hopefully we'll be able to take those successes and start implementing them into our other schools also. So we're really excited about a lot of groundbreaking work that's being done around here. I do have a question about the bridge. Not a question about the bridge, but our start times on the bridge. Our start times is all built around transportation success.
I know.
So any help you can provide? I know it's already on your radar, but to just get people through the city, but it's really going to affect our transportation schedule too. So.
Well, we're going to do some of the work at night. We're going to try to certainly keep the bridge open as much as we can during the peaks.
Yeah, we're only going to let and this can't be a blanket statement, but in general, we're only going to let the contractor take a lane, close a lane between 9 and 3. So I know that still overlaps a little bit on school times, but at least it's not during rush hour. Again, there will be exceptions to that. There will be times when we have to take a lane no matter what. But for the most part, the contractor knows that he's not supposed to close lanes between 9 and 3. And so how do you do that? How do you do that when you're replacing a bridge? Well, we're actually spending some extra money so that we can keep 4 lanes open as much as possible. What we're going to do is have the contractor, the bridge gets wider and it shifts to the west. So the contractor is going to get started on the western portion of the bridge while traffic continues to move. And then once that gets built, we'll put traffic on that portion that just got built, tear out the old bridge, and then finish the new bridge. So for the most part, we'll be able to keep 4 lanes of traffic moving as much as we can.
Great. Oh, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Swain, so I also, well, first of all, to just add on to what President Swain just said about the purchases of the office building, I want to, all of us would like to thank you all because it's because of our impact fees that we were able to take advantage of that opportunity. We have to reserve impact fees for projects related directly to growth. It was a perfect match, and we really wouldn't have been able to do that without your support. So thank you very much on that. And then another project too, which actually President Swain and Director Hayes have been really working to support, is the new concert hall at Inglemore. It was, for a long time, it's been overdue to have a full-sized music performance space at Inglemore. It's our one comprehensive high school that doesn't have one. And so it's been identified for a while, and by building a separate building, we can maximize matching funds from the state. But also I have to say, since my children go through Woodinville, several years ago, they got a theater, but just this past holiday season, there were, I shouldn't say this, it was many more family members were there than the capacity of a 550-seat theater could hold just this past December. And so the opportunity, I know that the musical performances here in Kenmore are so well prized that to have a 750-seat concert hall, I think it's just going to be such a benefit to not just the district, but to you as well, because obviously it'll be available for use as well. So just wanted to let you know that. I think, so 2021, so it's the final architectural plans are getting finished, and this May, they're going to break ground.
I'll probably get myself in trouble, but that's okay. I'm usually in trouble. We were very, very fortunate. 9 years ago, when we hired Mr. Carlinzy. I don't know that we could found a better person who's helped us grow, who has shepherded us through our learning curve on the council, and he's just such a tremendous asset to us as a city. However, you guys went through the same thing, or some of you did, when you went out looking for a new superintendent. My personal opinion is you guys did a fabulous job. She's wonderful. I love working with her. I love talking with her. She's great. So congratulations. And if,
You can say that anytime.
well, I'm not supposed to show favorites, but in any event, if there's really nothing else to come before us, I think we're adjourned.
I just would like to say thank you to all of you for being willing to do this, for embracing our schools, Inglemore, Kenmore Middle, Kenmore Elementary, Arrowhead. We adore them and think they're amazing, and the students and staff in them. But to know that we've got a city so behind supporting them, and your thoughtfulness of the work that you do within the city to make sure that our kids are safe and supported, and that we can then focus on education is really, really valued. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're entirely welcome. And hopefully, we can get the school board in a dragon boat.
It's a little challenge, a little board challenge and dragon boats.
And the city council.
That could
Now that's game on.
Actually, perhaps the council, is that what you were saying? Oh, game on.
Yeah.
Dr. Reed is not competitive at all.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
All right, if there's no further business to come before us, we're a little over, but that's okay. We'll sort of stand adjourned. And Kenmore
Thank
City
you.
Council will have a meeting, and let's start in about 5 minutes or so.
Present.
Councilmember Shrebnick. Here. Councilmember O'Kane.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
If you will please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved as written. And before I get rid of this, I got a piece of mail today from Department of Ecology, and I just want to read a couple sentences. I would like to take this opportunity to commend the City of Kenmore for its effort in developing the proposed of the Shoreline Master Program amendments. It's obvious a significant effort was invested in this update. So it's always nice to get something from state agency appreciating on you. So the next item on the agenda will be citizen comments. And this is an opportunity for you to express your views on issues that are important to you and to the community. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Will the clerk please call the first person?
Vicki Grayland.
Hello, I'm Vicki Grayland. I live in Kenmore. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. As a part of the community and as a part of the environmental community, I was very happy to see tonight's discussion with the school board. Sharing resources is environmentally and fiscally sound, and the discussion was very open. That was good to see. I think that being open to all possibilities increases our creativity. It's a sign of being creative, and I have a great faith in this community's creativity and ability to solve problems. Please consider the power of volunteers. The fields at Big Fin Hill Park were built by parents. They financed it in exchange for free rent for about 25 years with King County. And so thank you very much. And I look forward to this process as it moves forward.
Thank you, Ms. Grayling.
Fernell Miller.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Fernell Miller. I'm the daughter of Kenmore. So I have been a part of this community. My parents moved here in the 70s, and the Costi Ruiz pool, those were classmates of mine, and so I was actually in the district when we required swimming lessons. Being raised near water, that was a requirement. I am a PE teacher, so I am in the fields every day. That's why my hair is kind of wet today, but that's why. I have worked in over 12 of the schools in North Shore, from elementary through high school, and being a PE teacher, I do that on purpose to make myself visual in a white space community. And so I have firsthand knowledge of what's happening at schools, fields, all of those, and the PE teacher community has this conversation all the time. And so we'd love to be included and invited. I'd love to stop lining my own fields and maintaining them with my shovels and tools. So the volunteer part is very vivid. I rely on the service, the day of service that happens before school. The churches come to community and they have a day of serve. And if it weren't for those volunteers coming to my school and helping me resurface, line, organize, clean, dig, refill, I wouldn't be able to operate school. I've had to cancel a few of my events because when unwanted vehicles in the evening. Can I say that nicely? High school, come running donuts through the field, and then I come back the next day, and I've got all my track kids breaking their ankles, running through the ditches that they've left behind. Then I've got to fix all of that. I've been going through that for years, and so we have plenty of fields, and I'm so glad the school board was here to hear that conversation, be a part of that, and start that communication, because that is, we're living there. That's where we live, and I've been on those fields for, let's see, teaching 38 years now. So if you want to know anything about them, I hope you'll call me. Okay. Also, the swimming pools, that was new for me to hear. I've been using the Snohomish County Pool, which is an athletic center that houses all their high schools. They serve the swimming lessons community and a big, huge population for the adult community to swim. And that's one of the things that's sorely missing, that the adults are, we need water. And yes, we can get our babies and do all the swimming lessons, but we're left out of that population. And the lengths that I have to go to get to a pool, that's been a very difficult one. And plus being a woman of color, the kids around us in these populations, they don't have access to that. And it's very, there's a steep wall of inhibition to be able to be at the pools, lifeguards in front of them that look like them. So this is a part of the conversation that we need to be having together in our community, because it's not a side interest. We are the community. We've been here a long time. I'm proof of that. So we want to be able to access nature, pools, fields like everybody else. So thank you for hearing my thoughts today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nadia Reyna Silver.
Hello, my name is Nadia Reyna Silver. I live in Kenmore at 18230 70th Lane Northeast, about 5 minutes walk down behind the City Hall. This is my son, Jeremiah Matthew Turner. Most of you have seen him. Most of you know him. If you've been towards Inglemore, you've seen him there too. And he's my heart, absolutely, which is kind of why we're here, to be honest. I want to start what I'm going to say by admitting that I was at Advocacy Day last weekend. At least one of you saw me there, and I got to speak to our representative, and I got to speak to those people, and they were very adamant about the information I provided them, that we really don't have African American or intersectional or multiracial representation in our sector, and it's really, it's kind of upsetting, but you know, I've kind of taken that mantle and done the best that I can with it, and a lot of other things that I addressed them with. But I also took you guys' advice that you've been telling me for 2 years, is to take up my DXM, my robo-tripping mantle, and talk to them, which I have. They did not have a clue about it, and they said they put it on their list of things to look into. So I felt pretty good about that. Back to the racial issue. I recently found out that we don't have any kind of recognition of Black History Month. Now, you would wonder, well, since she looks as white as she does, why does she care? Well, I am still Black, you guys. 49% Nigerian. I did the DNA thingy. And he is part Creole, so he cannot be any Blacker unless he was actually Black. So I'm first generation multiracial. He is second generation multiracial. Black History Month matters to both of us. I was raised in our nation's capital. Believe me, you can't go a single corner without being reminded about the Black history and how African Americans and Black Americans in our country matter. Our very city, referencing Ms. Furnell earlier, is founded and cared for by Black Americans and African Americans and those who are mixed with Black American or African American. And by the way, African American does not mean somebody who was born as and had ancestry directly from an American. That also means people who have had direct parentage from Africa, whose parents who are immigrated here, and they are born here in America. That's what African American means. Black American means what everyone else pretty much thinks it means. So in any case, I'd like to put it to everyone's notice that that is something that should not stand. We need to have a recognition of Black History Month in Kenmore. We did a pride flag. This should not be that hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silver. Anybody else wishing, anybody else?
Tracy Bonashinsky. Tracy Bonashinsky, Kenmore. I am here because I have a vision for a more beautiful Kenmore and for salmon recovery as the driving force behind making that vision a reality. Kenmore has major historical and present-day salmon runs in our watershed, giving us the wonderful and huge responsibility of being good stewards to a fish that is important symbolically to the Pacific Northwest and sacred to the indigenous peoples who have been on this land since time immemorial. Salmon co-evolve with the land we are on, with the Sammamish River and Swamp Creek and Little Swamp Creek and all the waterways that flow through Kenmore on their way to the Salish Sea and Pacific Ocean. Because they co-evolved with this land, restoring healthy salmon habitat is also restoring habitat that is beneficial to other native fish, insects, birds, and animals. And people need what salmon need too. We need water in our rivers, streams, and lakes that is cold, clear, and clean, and we need healthy land that can support our continued existence. I believe that using a salmon recovery lens when making decisions about Kenmore's parks will allow us to make sound decisions about how to steward the land that is in our care. To that end, I would like to request that the current draft PROS plan be taken out of the consent agenda. I believe that it needs additional discussion and revision before it is approved. I made some notes that I sent earlier today by email to all 7 of you honorable council members, and I've also provided a paper copy tonight. They may feel slightly out of context here, but I'd like to highlight just some of the things that I made note of that I sent to you. So I recommend that salmon recovery play a larger role in the PROS plan. For example, framing how we steward parks in our care, and that Kenmore take advantage of Recreation and Conservation Office grants to help facilitate this work. I strongly recommend that the VIII Salmon Recovery Plan be included as a resource and relevant planning document in the beginning section of the PROS plan. I recommend 8 goals instead of the current 7 that are listed. I recommend that salmon habitat restoration be included in all decisions made in parks that include a stream, river, or lake shoreline. I recommend that a policy objective include making sure that maintenance and updating of parks as well as master planning uses a salmon recovery lens to make sure that all decisions support VIII salmon recovery plans. And I think I'll let you read the rest, but I feel very strongly that salmon recovery and the VIII salmon recovery plan should play a much larger role in the PROS plan and in all of our decision-making in Kenmore. I also like to say that I fully support Kenmore officially recognizing Black History Month. And thank you so much for your time and for hearing me.
Thank you, Ms. Bonashinsky.
Phyllis Finley.
Good evening. Phyllis Finley, Kenmore. You may have thought, hoped, maybe, that you had heard the last of me last Monday night. But here I am again. Tonight, I'm sharing an opinion and making a request. The opinion. For those of you that took the time to prepare and present explanatory comments prior to last week's vote, that act showed courage and integrity, especially knowing that half of the audience did not share your point of view. It would have been easier to simply vote yes or no, finish the meeting, and slip out of here as quickly as possible. You did not. For that, I applaud you, admire you, and thank you. My request. You may or may not have read the detailed email I sent this morning regarding the participation rate section of the PROS plan. It's my assumption that the PROS plan is meant to be a living, usable document for the next 6 years, not one that is put on the shelf and brought back out again in 2026 for a do-over. Because the contents of the PROS plan have real ramifications and consequences, I'm concerned that the participation data be as accurate as possible. Constituents have made it clear that they value open space and passive recreation. I continue to be puzzled and concerned that only the participation rates of active recreation are addressed in any detail in the plan. In a document that represents so much time and attention to detail, it seems implausible that the omission is simply an oversight. There may be a logical explanation for this, of which I am unaware. I am requesting, once again, that before approving as is, the participation rates in the PROS plan be revised to accurately reflect participation for both active and passive recreation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Finley.
Bob Black.
Bob Black, excuse me, Bob Black, 8232 Northeast 166th Street, Kenmore, Washington. I'm here basically to address a specific issue that you even have on your agenda tonight. It's item number 10. It has to do with a design, which is the 84th Street and Simons Road. Several years ago, more than several actually, my kids were still in high school. There was a CIP in place to place a traffic light at this intersection. Now I know that some of you tend to believe that traffic lights cost millions and millions of dollars. They don't. They cost between $250,000 and $500,000. They take approximately $8,000 a year on average, depending on what kind of light you have, to maintain, and that takes up for the electricity. There is a much better, safer, simpler method than creating this, I'm going to call it a debacle, of a traffic intersection. If you look at this intersection closely, you'll notice that both streets make a slightly skewed X. On that X, there's a thing in the very corner of each point. There's a pole, a telephone pole. One can do what's called a wire span quad traffic light. Basically, it's driving a cable across from pole to pole, and you put a quad light in the middle of it. You have wire span lights already in Kenmore, so it's not something new. You can place a walk, don't walk sign on each pole. So half of your infrastructure is already there to do this. You don't need to redo the curbs. All you need to do is remove the curbs. I'm sure you remember the infamous, as I refer to them, coffin curbs that got placed all around. That was an interesting item, a very interesting item. You're on the path of doing virtually the same thing with this design. If you need help in figuring this out, trust me, I can help you. I have the experience in this. I know how engineers like their designs, and I know how they covet their designs. Being an engineer, I know how difficult it is to convince them they're wrong. I'm what's called a practical engineer. I'm that guy that likes to be proved wrong and changes his design in order to make it work. This design won't work. You want your target zero date, or you want your target zero point to hit, don't use this design. Use something that has traffic lights, walk, don't walk signs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Black.
Cody Painter.
Cody Painter, 7735 Northeast 199th in Kenmore. Just here to, I guess, hold you guys accountable. I got 1,200 parents that are not very happy right now. Well, 1,194. I did get the 3 emails that were against the EIS process. I can clarify some of the stuff that was talked about at the NSD meeting. Sundays, many times we get refused to rent fields at like Inglemoor because they don't have the staff to come unlock the gates. The other thing with Inglemoor, if we play there in March, it's $204 per game that we have to pay to rent the field and the lights. So for our little league, that's a little bit, we use it, but that's a huge cost for us. So that's one thing that I wanted to clarify from the NSD. It's great that you guys want to go and work for these fields, but I thought it was a bit disingenuous that you make the statement that you're fighting for fields in Kenmore, but you don't even have the patience to wait to see if anything could have been done at St. Edward's. You killed it, right? So I thought that was extremely disingenuous to portray yourselves like that. So keep working for us, because not only me, but there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be holding you accountable. So keep working it, find us a solution. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Painter.
No one else has signed up to speak.
Anybody else? Miss? Yes. Mr. Hendrickson, you can sign up at the end if you want to. You go ahead, but you need to sign up when you're through.
I wasn't planning to speak, but I just will say a couple of things. First of all, hi, I'm Karen Prince, and live in Kenmore. I was very glad to hear the conversation earlier this evening between you and the North Shore School District. We feel that that's what has needed to be needed to have been done. I'd just like to echo the first speaker that said, Vicki, consider the power of volunteers on what work might need to be done in whatever is going to happen. I appreciated Councilman Files' ideas for looking around for extra money. Mr. Carlinci says there's no money, which is a kind of puzzlement because you're going to spend a lot more on the on the St. Edward's fields, but now there's no money. But I don't understand why we could have there's a bond issue for walkways and waterways, and it just seems, is there a possibility that you could have a bond issue for a municipal ball field complex? That way is a way of raising money, and people, as Mr. Painter says, are really wanting to have the ball fields. So that was my question. Is there a way of having a taxing authority or issuing a bond? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Prince.
Good evening, council members. John Hendrickson, Kenmore, Washington. I agree. It took, with Phyllis Finley, it took a lot of courage and integrity for the council to vote to stop the EIS, because the EIS, we already knew what the outcome was. State Parks told you, and it should have been in your staff report, that the impacts up at the ball field for your project, you couldn't mitigate. And when you refused to listen, they threw up their hands after the Westport meeting and said, okay, then pay us $300,000 for an EIS, because you guys just won't be reasonable. You never tried to do it the right way from the beginning. Look at what's there, do a complete SEPA analysis, and then try to build probably a good grass field, protecting the wetland, have what you always had, a baseball field, a soccer field, football field. Could have done that. You spend $600,000 doing it this way because Brent Smith and everyone from the Little League that follows him, and Cody says 1,198 people are coming after you. Well, 4 people had the courage and integrity. 3 people voted to spend the $231,000, Deborah Srebnick, Dave Baker, Nigel Herbrig. And that's just selling out and not working with the Little League like adults, but caving in like cowards. So look at what they said. Nigel said, we all know how we got here. We have to finish what we started. Sounds like a noble person. Well, how we got here was you wouldn't listen to state parks. You wouldn't do a complete SEPA with the bat study in there. That's how you got there. You sold out for votes. You don't want 1,198 people coming after you, so you'll spend $600,000 to waste our money on a project you know won't be approved by state parks, and you wanted to spend $231,000 more. Deborah Srebnick said she wanted to make an informed decision, spend $231,000. I mean, how much information do you need? State Parks told our staff, it should have been in your staff report. If you don't have it in your staff report, you already have an answer to that question. I mean, what are you doing? You're supposed to be overseeing the city and making sure staff gives you the information that you need, which they already had. You don't need 231,000. You needed 231,000 so you can get their votes. On top of the 600,000. You said it would cost $4 million to buy a new ball field. Lake Point is on the King County Assessor's roll for $5.5 million. You can't use eminent domain and take that property? At least a property that's not in service, doesn't have any income generation? How many ball fields could we get for that? Okay, Dave, your video didn't work again, so we didn't hear from Dave, but we know how Dave votes. So, there's a long history. I've given it to you before. You need to work with the Little League.
Your time is up, Mr. Hendrickson.
And the Little League needs to go up and get on the waiting list for Big Fin Hill Park, which they haven't done for 20 years. We all pay for that park. It's a King County park. It's 0.8 of a mile from St. Ed's. You need to work with them, at least the 4 that actually have courage and integrity. And then the sellouts, you got to keep them under control. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson. Anybody else? Anybody else wishing to be heard? If I can get you to sign up when you're through.
Okay, Mike Satterley, 5909 Northeast Arrowhead Drive, Kenmore. I'm president of KB Fast Pitch, Girls Little League organization. We represent Kenmore and Bothell. As I said last week, we practice outside of Kenmore and Bothell because there's not enough fields, not enough practice space, not just for us, but for the Little League. All the fields are occupied, no matter where you go. Same thing with soccer. I've been a soccer coach. We practice at Arrowhead when we were little girls, Big Fin Hill when we were bigger. It's tough to find fields for anything around here, period. I appreciate the city getting together with the school board tonight. It reminded me of one of the very first things I did when I kind of entered the civic involvement. I was president of the Ballard Lions Club when I was in my 20s. And as a very new president, we were dedicating a ball field. And one of the old guys, past presidents, came up and said, "Hey, you might have to speak." And I was like, "What?" And the guy speaking before me was John Stanford. And he is a very good speaker, so I was very nervous, and I got up and I spoke a little bit, and not only was he there, Cheryl Chow was there, I think Ron Sims was there, you name it, from Seattle politics, Seattle area politics, they were there. It was a celebration. The Lions Club donated $1,000 of seed money to get that field started. And it was a refurbishment of an old field. It was a field that already existed, but we put up the seed money, and the school district and the city and the community worked together to make it happen. So something like that can happen. It is possible, but it takes leadership, and it takes people to decide that they want to do this and make it happen. So it's possible to do here. We just have to decide that it's a priority. And if we can collectively make that decision and work towards that goal, we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Satterley. Anybody else? No, you've already had your time. Thank you very much for your comments tonight. Ms. Grayland, thank you for your comments. And Ms. Miller and Ms. Silver, we are going to have Black History Proclamation on the agenda next meeting. I think it'll be on the 24th. Ms. Benishewski, we are working very, very closely with Forterra to restore the entire Sammamish River. We're very concerned about the salmon and have been since the inception of the city. That's why we've taken on these partnerships like with Forterra, like with other property owners, to restore the shorelines as best as we can. One of the other issues with the river is it's too shallow, it's too hot, and it doesn't move fast enough. And these are all things we're working on and we are certainly aware of. Ms. Finley, we are going to be talking about the pros plan tonight, and Ms. Benishewski, we will be talking about that. Mr. Black, thank you for your comments on 84th. We will be discussing and hearing from staff on that tonight. Mr. Painter, thank you for your comments on the ball fields, and Mr. Satterley, we certainly appreciate them. Ms. Prince, we do have a bond issue out, but there's got to be some stronger city benefit reasons for a bond issue that we can get some serious things that are done. We have a city that very short on sidewalks. We are solving part of that issue with the walkways and waterways bond issue, but there's other things that we really need to be concerned with as far as a bond issue go. There's grant monies, there's other sources, but bond issues is something we go to the public for a vote, and usually it's trying to make the city as a whole better. Not that ball fields are not important. Mr. Hendrickson, thank you for your comments, and make sure you sign up, please. With that, next item on the agenda is training with Washington City's Insurance Authority. City Council do's and don'ts. Ms. Bennett, the Executive Director of Washington City's Insurance Authority, WCIA.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'd like to introduce to you Ann Bennett, who is the Executive Director of the Washington City's Insurance Authority. The city has been a member of this insurance pool since incorporation, and in addition to providing our property and liability and cyber insurance, they also provide excellent risk management services and training. So some of you may remember Ann from 2 years ago when we brought this training to you, but I'm sure all of you will find it engaging and interesting, and she always brings new situations and stories. So I hope you find it very helpful. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Ann. Thank you.
So thank you so much for having me back. It's always fun to talk to councils. I'm Ann Bennett. I'm the Executive Director of WCIA. This is a training, so please feel free to ask me questions throughout the presentation. I am coming to you to talk a little bit about WCIA and also how you as a council can create liability for your city. So you wear a lot of hats as a council person. And I come from one perspective, which is the insurance and how you can cause some liability exposure. So again, please feel free to ask me questions. For those of you who do not know what WCIA is, we are a municipal organization organized to pool risk together. We have over 160 members, mostly cities, where we created a self-insurance risk pool. These are authorized by statute, and we've been around since 1981. When we talk about who are members of WCIA, I have Bothell, Kirkland, Woodinville, Mount Lake Terrace. We just signed up Linwood this year. So we have you surrounded, I like to say, like Forest Park as well. But I would say 80%, closer to 90% of cities nationwide are members of risk pools. And that's because you as an entity are not attractive to the traditional insurance market. You have a lot of bad risks. And so I'm going to talk to you about some of those risks tonight. We have over 160 million in assets. We're one of the strongest risk pools we are the strongest in the state and one of the strongest in the nation. We provide self-insurance of all of your liability risks for $25 million per occurrence. That means per issue, you have $25 million in coverage. You can also purchase property and boiler machinery with us, which you do. This year, we also added some pollution premises coverage, and we also provide cyber coverage for the city, and we buy those on behalf of the members. So aside with just the insurance, we strongly believe in risk management, and that's a caveat of pooling. The idea is, as entities, you're pooling your risk together. You want to make sure that you're a good risk for the other members of this pool. So if you create liability, you're not just paying it on your own. Kirkland's paying it, Woodinville's paying it, Bothel's paying it. So this is why one of the big caveats is risk management. And we have all kinds of programs, trainings. It's one of the things that we really concentrate on is how can you avoid risk from occurring in the first place. So I'm going to start with you and talk about liability exposures that you can bring. So here's some good news. Individuals, you receive absolute immunity when you're legislating. So you cannot be sued individually for the decisions you make when you are legislating as a whole. So I can't sue you if I don't like your decision and say, I'm going to try and reverse the decision. I'm going to sue you all individually. So when you're passing ordinances, when you're adopting resolutions, when you're looking at budget, you have absolute immunity. This has been tested in the courts. We had a case where a citizen was unhappy about some zoning, actually named all of the city council members individually. We brought forth the case, said you can't do that, continued to do it, and actually a federal judge awarded all of our attorney's fees plus $100,000 in sanctions. That's how strong your immunity is. But remember, it's in the context of the council meeting as a whole. So there are situations you can get yourself in trouble, but as long as you're acting as a body as a whole, you have this immunity. So I'm going to get into a little bit of land use exposure, and I talk about this. I know you guys use hearing examiners, but there may be some times when you operate in a quasi-judicial role. What you want to know is when are you in your quasi-judicial role, because it's very important that you are not legislating at that time. If you are in a quasi-judicial role, I guarantee you your city attorney will tell you you are in a quasi-judicial role. Right, Don? Yes. Sorry. So they will say you're acting quasi-judicially. When you are acting as a judge, so you must be fair and impartial. And that means that you cannot communicate with either the opponent to the project or the proponent. So what happens is you have to be completely unbiased. So if you talk to one or the other, or you've had contact, if you're going to sit in that role, you need to immediately say, I have had contact with the opponent or proponent, and identify that you have a potential conflict. If you don't, you could be violating what's called the appearance of fairness doctrine. When you are quasi-judicial, you can also only use facts that are in the record. So you can't go do your own research. You can't base it on what you think you know or somebody's neighbor told you. It's only what's in the record. You're going to make findings of fact, and you're going to use the record and the testimony to make those findings of fact. You don't want to act in what's called an arbitrary and capricious manner. And that's what all of the litigation really is about. Is, the record was clear, this was straightforward, and usually it's the council was arbitrary and capricious in their decision. It just came out of nowhere. And that's often where we get the land use litigation, is we'll get a petition to say this decision was unfair, it was arbitrary and capricious. But you can get yourself into trouble in other matters, and I've put 3 cases up here that I like to talk about. The first one is Westmark versus the city of Burien. This was a very controversial project involving apartments in the city of Burien. The community was very much against this project. This was when Burien first incorporated it. It had been a King County project, and they took it over. What I can tell you is there was a lot of turnover in staff. This was prior to a lot of current land use law, so I don't think this delay could be as long as it was. But this project started in 1993, and it's still going on right now. It hasn't ended. But what happened was they brought forth this apartment complex, and there was kind of this debate over King County gave us a mitigated determination of significance. You're giving us a determination of significance. This isn't fair, and it went back and forth for many years. What ended up happening is throughout the years, the city council was very vocal about, we don't want apartments in Burien and we have to stop this project. And that was all over the record. What ends up occurring is at one point we have a settlement. We have a deal where we say, you're going to have a decision, we're going to pay some money, and this is going to go forward. And so it goes to the council, everybody has a deal, releases are signed, and when their project goes up for approval, the council says, nope, no deal, we changed our mind. Oh, and by the way, the deal you had wasn't in open session, so it was not a deal. And they immediately ran off, filed suit again for breach of contract and for tortious interference with a business expectancy. This case went to trial. There was a verdict by a Snohomish County jury of $10 million. And it was in Snohomish County because of all the conflicts King County had been involved in. So, of course, with $10 million, you think, what are you going to do? You're going to appeal it. You hope the court will, find mercy and reduce this award. Not only did the Court of Appeals not reduce it, but they excoriated the city and the council and said they clearly interfered with this project, and it was intentional and it was deliberate. And so they were awarded their attorney's fees, interest, and were able to prove in federal court that there were federal violations and got an additional amount of attorney's fees. And this project is still trying to be built right now in the city of Burien. Mission Springs versus the city of Spokane, it's one of those cases I always say is the city attorney's case. This is a case that involved a huge development, and many citizens were against the development, but it had already been going through the process. They had already been approved. They were starting their grading, and the mayor decided to say, I'd like an update on this project. And so the planning director got up and said, grading permits have been issued, they're moving forward. And at the meeting, the mayor said, I want you to stop this project. City attorney stands up and says, Mayor, you don't have the authority to stop the project. It's vested, the permits have been issued, you cannot stop this project. Now, I'm not really sure why that conversation was on the record, because I think generally it should have been, let's go into executive session and discuss the risks of trying to stop this project. But something happened in Spokane that night, and they had this all on the record, where the city attorney is saying, you are violating their rights, you are violating the state law, you're violating federal law, and they went ahead and did it anyway. So this was a case where the courts found no legislative immunity for the actions when the council stopped it, and found them liable under federal and state law. I don't know the actual amount of the settlement in the end. It was lots of money, and there was lots of discussion about who was going to cover whom, because there were lots of intentional acts in there, and so they were insured by an insurance company, and there was lots of disputes over litigation. I bring up this last one, it's a county case, Woodsview, and I bring it up because it actually was a win for the county, but what happened is the only reason they were sued is there was an email from a commissioner that said, we have to figure out a legal way to stop this project, and he was talking to a constituent. I guarantee you this project never would have resulted in litigation but for a public disclosure request that found that email. The good news is that no one in staff ever knew the commissioner said that and was able to show exactly why this was a complex permit. I will say there are times when you'll have very political issues brought to you. The answer is always follow the law. And I know we have a program when there's some complex issues. If you want to hear a second opinion, your city attorney will guide you through it, but we'll also offer a land use attorney, and they'll come into exec session and talk about some of the liability around the project if you have concerns. So personnel, this is an area that you really want to stay in your legislative role. Your role in personnel is setting budgets. You want to set code, so sometimes you'll adopt employment policies by code. You want to make sure that you're looking at the budget with regard to personnel. Everything else is the executive's role, is the city manager's role, and you do not want to get involved. And that's because this is an area where you can be sued personally. Hiring, firing, discipline is the city manager's role. I, as an executive director, can be held liable for my actions with regard to my employees. What I have seen is if council members get involved, it really muddies the waters. And personnel law changes constantly. And if you don't know the law, you can really get into trouble. And I had a city that literally split apart when the council took sides of over the city manager for an employee. It went to trial, defense verdict. It was the right decision, but it cost us $2 million to try that case. All because people had strong feelings, even though the decision was the right decision. So I urge you, it really can tear apart a city when you get involved in personnel matters, and leave that to Rob. That's his role. Harassment and discrimination. You can be sued individually if you are harassing employees. You need to know the law, and you need to know Kenmore's policies. You are held to those standards. I can tell you an old story from the city of San Diego where the mayor was accused by 20 women of sexual harassment. 20 women. And eventually he was charged criminally for some of his acts. There were over $1 million in just the settlements. It had nothing to do with defending them. If you're aware of that behavior going on, it behooves you to report it immediately. And I would say report it to the city attorney, report it to Rob. If you're aware of behavior occurring and you see staff interaction, report it to Rob, report it to the city attorney. You want to take action immediately. If the city, if you are part of the city, if you're aware of the conduct and do nothing, that is a huge problem for us. We cannot defend that. If you know it's going on, you need to say something, and the city will do everything they can to stop it and follow policies. So again, I urge you to report it and then stay out and let the executive do his job. Another area, negligent misrepresentation. This is where you could make specific promises and assurances, and someone can rely on it to their detriment and suffer damages. I've mentioned this before, the last time I was out here. Don't ever feel bad saying, I don't know. Because if you give a wrong answer and the person is damaged because of it, they relied on it to their detriment and have damages, we are liable. I would always say refer specific questions to your staff. They're the experts on it. Feel free to follow up. Hey, did staff member so-and-so, did you get back to the constituent who contacted me? Go to Rob. Hey, did they answer this constituent's questions? If you make that representation, hey, yes, you can definitely do something, and you don't want to be the person that I'm using as my exhibit in these trainings. So I would say don't take matters into your own hands, always use the staff. Defamation, this is an area where you want to be very careful. When you're legislating and you have legislative concerns and it's a statement or opinion, you have immunity. That's what you're here to do. You're here to debate the issues, you're here to talk about the issues, and you have an immunity. There's no defamation when you are discussing matters of concern. Where you can get into trouble is when you're talking about individuals. And there are very fine lines. I would be considered a public official. I'm in an executive director position for a public agency. You can probably say a lot about me because I am a matter of public concern. Other individuals, that is a very dangerous area. And I say that because any untruth can give rise to liability. So saying things like, this person's a liar, guess what? If there's a shred of truth that I wasn't lying about, you're in trouble. I've seen things in email, I've seen things in text messages, I've seen things show up in litigation where I'm horrified that anybody would say these things. So what I would caution you on is, golden rule, if you stick to the golden rule, you're fine. Just be very careful about what you say about individuals when you're dealing with matters. I've had some where I had a police chief say, they call me dishonest, they call me corrupt, they call me, and I said, well, you might rise to public official, unfortunately. It's still not right. And so what I would say is, if you have a concern, you go to your city manager and you don't air it here on the dais. Public Works, this is where I talk to you, and I want to preface this. I call it politically engineering, and this is road design. But to give you a little bit of information why I have this concern is something in our state called joint and several liability. And juries don't hear about it. Most people have no idea that this exists. And what this is joint and several liability says if a plaintiff is fault-free, they can sue multiple defendants. And if there is at least 1% of fault allocated to a defendant, they can collect the entire judgment against that defendant. So where this comes up a lot is in road design cases, because you often have a catastrophic injury. The person who has hit them has no insurance or not enough insurance to cover the injury, and so they're looking for an entity with what we call as the deep pocket, who can compensate the victim. So in road design cases, these are actually engineering malpractice cases. And so when we are defending them, we need to have an engineering record of the decision we made. And I can tell you from experience, crosswalks are not force fields. You have a lot of citizens who will come forward and tell you, you need a crosswalk here. You want to listen to that concern, and you want to give it to your engineer for them to determine whether it meets engineering standards and warrants. I have seen many fatalities, many horrible injuries in crosswalks that were put in without engineering. And to me, if you can, you want to talk to staff and you want to study it. I can tell you a story about a city of mine where citizens came in and said, we want a stop sign. We want a stop sign at this location. And the mayor said, put in a stop sign. Didn't meet warrants, didn't have the traffic flows. And then what happened? All the traffic backed up, because all of these are traffic control devices that control the flow of traffic. And by putting that stop sign in, they created all kinds of conflicts behind it. And he said to me, the mayor said, I had triple the amount of citizens the next meeting to tell me somebody's going to die out there because of all the conflicts behind it. So I would always say, when somebody brings a concern, listen to it, refer it to your staff, and let them engineer it. I don't like to hear promises and assurance. Don't worry, we'll make this road safer. Don't worry, no more children have to die. What you're trying to do, and I know you guys are doing Target Zero, and to me, that's all engineering, is you're looking at what's the engineering solution, what are the things that are out there that can help you engineer towards safer roads. And that's what my goal always is in these cases, is to be able to say, it is engineered, it's met all standards. And we've had many verdicts in the millions of dollars with regard to road design, and many settlements as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and you briefly touched on this, but can you speak a little bit more detail about public statements about the safety of a road? Like, for example, boy, that stretch of road sure is a death trap. Can you speak to that and the possible consequences that can come from that?
You will be plaintiff's witness A. I actually had that in a case where 3 council members, along with the mayor, were called as witnesses against the city for statements they made. And unfortunately, for them, I have a very good attorney who said, and what's your engineering degree? I mean, it was a very uncomfortable experience. A, you're testifying against your city, and B, do you have engineering experience? You came out and you said it's dangerous. Do you know how many accidents are on this road? Do you know how many conflicts there have been? Have you studied this road? So, do you know what the lighting is? So you actually become an adversary, and it is a very uncomfortable position to be in. And I know, I've watched it, it's not fun, and oftentimes afterwards the people tell me, I wish I'd never said that, because you end up being the witness against the city. It also sometimes can lead people to believe it is dangerous when it really, that is an opinion. That may not be a fact. And I see that all the time where people make opinions, but you can study the data and find out the conflicts. You can do traffic studies, and you can watch the conflicts and count it and engineer for it. So what I would say is you create, an inflammatory situation that when we get into litigation is not helpful. So Executive session. This is an area that, believe it or not, I've had quite a bit of trouble in, where members of council like to share what goes on in executive session. I had one council member who used to work for the newspaper and got on the council and thought, wow, this is great. I am getting so much insider scoop. And after every executive session would go to his friends at the paper and talk about everything that happened. And we said, excuse me, you can't do that. Executive session is there so that you can talk about issues that could lead to litigation. And you need to know what's happening. I've had situations where we've briefed council on what our game plan is, and next thing I know, the other side's telling me what my game plan is. I've had, this is as much as I think I'm going to spend on this case, and I've been in a mediation. We know she's going to spend this on a case. I'm just flabbergasted. We had one case, I mentioned that we have land use attorneys that'll come in during really, I would say, politically charged developments. And he came in, handed out a paper that said, here's all the possible liability exposures for these various decisions in executive session. Council member came out, and there was a group that had hired a lawyer, and they were there to oppose this project. And this council member walked out and handed what was given to him in executive session of all the potential liabilities. And so I watched it on film. It was actually amazing. The city attorney just leaps across the room and starts grabbing at this paper saying, she is, we have not waived privilege, and had to stop and say, have you waived privilege? Have you waived privilege? Because the privilege of that attorney communication is the council's. One person can't waive it. And it was also an executive session. And so this council member was actually later sanctioned for those actions. So, I would tell you it can jeopardize defense of our litigation, and sanctions can be imposed. I had one council that was what I'll call so leaky that we just said, you're never going to hear about any litigation ever again, because we can't trust that it won't get out to others. And there's a reason that you are in that room with the attorney, so that you can get the information and you're not jeopardizing the defense of the case. This is be mindful of written communications. And I say this because in my world, I see a lot of evidence come in through email, through Twitter, through Facebook, through texts. You have all kinds of public disclosure issues, so I would say always use city email addresses. Don't use your personal email. You're working for the public. If you're discussing matters of public concern, that is subject to public disclosure. Be very careful using your personal computer for your city business. It could subject it to search. I would say be very mindful of the Open Public Meetings Act. I was reading not too long ago of a case where actually it was in a newspaper, where there was kind of a serial meeting going on by text. And so it was a constituent talking to a mayor, and then the mayor saying, I think I've got 3, let me go talk to this person, and then starts texting, shuts down that conversation, but goes to the council member, do I have you on this issue? Yeah, you have me on this issue. Shuts down that text, goes to the next one. That's called a serial meeting. And that can get you in trouble with the Open Public Meetings Act, because you want to have that conversation here so that members of the public are aware of what's occurring in a public meeting. You can't have that meeting in secret by email, by text. I had one council where they would go to the coffee shop before the meetings and make all the decisions. It's like, no, you can't do that. Or the after council drinking session where they would talk about what they're going to do at the next council meeting. You can't do that. Open Public Meetings Act is, you don't want to violate it, and it's there so that the public is aware of the decisions you're making and the positions you're taking. You can lose your legislative immunity if you are not acting as a body as a whole, if you're having these serial meetings. And there was a city that not too far from here had some major litigation over Open Public Meetings Act, over email and some business being done on the side. And in the end, I think it was about $400,000 that the city ended up paying. And that's something I don't cover because it's a fine and a penalty. So I would say be very careful. I also want to touch a little bit on Facebook. This is kind of a gray area of when is it your page and when is it the city's page. And usually I encourage councils and cities to have some policies on social media use. I currently have a case where a mayor was using his personal Facebook page, and a citizen was making some comments on there that were very offensive, and so he blocked the citizen. And there's now a claim that that was a public forum, because not only was it his personal Facebook page, but he talked about city business. That's up for debate, and he's still saying it's my personal email, but it's a question of, did you open up a public forum? And so I would say it's very unclear law, and so I'm sure your city attorney can assist you on what you can and can't do. There was some public records cases that came out of some Facebook posts not too long ago, and one of them was clearly just a campaign page. But again, be aware, if you're talking city business, you could be opening a public forum and you may be opening up for public disclosure. So be very careful. So with that, can I answer any questions? That's how you can get yourselves in trouble. I'm happy to answer any questions you would have.
Any questions? Comments you make against somebody. Defamation.
Okay.
I've got an opponent that's running against me. I can say pretty much anything.
You can, in
Lies,
election.
truth, or whatever, it's all fair.
Campaign, all fair game. There's case law on that. Campaigning, fair game, it's not. So that's where the case law came down and said, you can say whatever you want in
That was a
campaigns.
state Supreme Court ruling, I think, that said, speak away.
Yep.
It's all legal.
In elections, yes.
Yep, in elections, it's all legal.
Yes.
All right, any other questions, any other comments?
I stepped out briefly when you were talking about quasi-judicial. Does the council know of the scenarios when they would be in a quasi-judicial role? Did you cover that?
Pretty much I said the city attorney will let them know.
Okay, yeah, just in Kenmore, a lot of land use decisions for site-specific cases go to our hearing examiner, and then they go on to Superior Court, so you're not put in that appeal role. But there are times, it's pretty rare here in Kenmore, but there are times when you are in that quasi-judicial role. One example would be like a site-specific rezone. Another one would be in the case of a development agreement. Our attorneys have taken the conservative view and said that's quasi-judicial. When it comes to just regular zoning changes, let's say you want to rezone a large neighborhood, that's not quasi-judicial, that's legislative. Any other scenarios, Debbie or Charlie, when council would be in a quasi-judicial role? Site-specific rezone, development agreement, that's about it, wouldn't you say, here, given the way we do things in Kenmore? In other cities, some cities have a land use decision from a hearing examiner go to the city council. We've elected not to do that here, and it goes to Superior Court instead. So I'm just trying to think of the scenarios where council would be quasi-judicial, and I can only think of a couple.
And we actually recommend the process that you have from a liability perspective.
Yeah.
I think it's easier for council so that, it does go to a hearing examiner who can make those findings of fact, conclusion of law, and then you're not put in that awkward position of you can't talk to your neighbor because you have a pending quasi-judicial matter, or you can't talk to your constituents. So we actually advocate to do the hearing examiner.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very informative as usual. All right. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Councilmember O'Kane?
I'd like to pull item G, the pros plan, from the consent agenda, please.
All right, so Let's move on with the consent agenda minus item G. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Now second it. We are about to approve the consent agenda minus item G. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The approval of the consent agenda minus item G is approved unanimously. Okay, let's talk about item G. The pros plan. What specific questions do you have?
Excuse me. I have a few questions related to the pros plan. I've been giving it further consideration and do have some questions I want to follow up on based on citizen comment, in addition to items that I have had on my mind as studying this for the past month.
Ms. Bent, can you perhaps answer some questions here, please? There is an email out, I know, where you answered a bunch of concerns earlier today.
And it might be helpful if Ms. Bent also talked about the process that led up to this point, the Planning Commission's role and the public hearing they held on this and the public comment they received leading up to council considering this item.
Right. So that is all true. You heard the Planning Commission's recommendation. You requested some changes to the pros plan, which we have incorporated. And it was on the consent agenda this evening because we thought we'd addressed all your comments. In terms of the next steps of the process, once council approves it, it does need to then be approved by the state, by the Recreation and Conservation Office, and the deadline for that is March 1st. So if it isn't approved, then I will need to request an extension from the state for 6 weeks to see if we can meet that deadline.
Can you just review the process the Planning Commission went through?
So the Planning Commission went through, they did surveys to kind of get data to inform what the demand and need was. They had lots of public outreach asking the community what they wanted to have in the pros plan. They reviewed the goals and policies and made some changes in the goals and policies to reflect the data that was collected. And then from that, then they also then put forward a recommendation for a capital facilities plan, which outlines then a list of capital projects over the 20-year period to implement the pros plan to meet that demand. So that is kind of the process that they followed. They did the studies, they did the public outreach, they reviewed the past plan, and then they made changes based on all that information and presented that to you. So this
did they hold a public hearing?
They did hold a public hearing. So they held a public hearing on the pros plan document. An additional public hearing is not required by the council unless there are substantive changes to that document. The current changes that council has previously requested and that staff has addressed have been minor in nature and don't rise to that level of a substantive change.
Councilmember Curtis.
How long ago did we start this pros process?
This was on the docket last year, so the Planning Commission took several months before bringing forward their recommendation to you. So this was a large docket item for the Planning Commission last year over a several month period, and all the Planning Commission meetings were also open to the public. All the information was also presented on the city's website.
Ms. O'Kane, you have some specific questions?
I do. I have some specific questions and comments. They do relate to salmon habitat restoration, and I just have some questions related to, I'll just draw this out a bit. As Representative Raya 8, I do think it would be positive to include in the Raya Salmon Recovery Plan as a resource in our planning documentation section. As climate action is a high priority for the city as it moved up from number 10 to number 3 in the city, I think it's very important to have high visibility in our pros plan that this is a direction that we're going. There has been a change over the years, and currently now, I think it's very important. So one of the areas that the city of Kenmore can really take action is in habitat restoration, in particular salmon habitat restoration. We are all fully aware that salmon, the Chinook salmon, is an endangered species, along with kokanee and other salmon. We are on the Sammamish Slough, at the mouth of the Sammamish Slough that goes into Lake Washington, a critical area for salmon, as identified by RIA 8 and Forterra and the city of Kenmore, as the mayor mentioned, since incorporation. My question related to this is, if we're not specifically speaking to salmon habitat restoration in our pros plan, how and where are we going to make this a priority? Would it be possible to have a salmon habitat restoration initiative without incorporating it into the pros plan? That's my first question.
And the answer would be yes. Typically, or I guess there's more information about habitat restoration and stewardship and protection of fish and wildlife in the natural environment of the comprehensive plan. And in fact, in the pros plan, there is reference to say, for additional information on the natural environment, please refer to the natural environment element in the comprehensive plan. And that full element is attached to the pros plan as Appendix F. So I think there is quite a lot of specific references to stewardship, to habitat restoration, and restoring habitat for salmon in the natural environment. There are also then, in the city's critical area regulations, also speaks to restoration and mitigation when there are impacts. And one of the things, in fact, tonight when we bring forward the discussion of Squires Landing Park, we'll specifically talk about efforts in that specific park capital improvement project where there are measures taken to restore habitat and enhance habitat for salmon along the Sammamish River.
And then I did have one more question related to salmon habitat restoration, which would have been including in our 7 goals. And I'm not sure if this is something that the council would be interested in including or adopting, just either a slight tweak in language on number 3, where it's preserve, maintain, and enhance built and natural environments to ensure quality recreational opportunities exist. Maybe restore, but I actually think it maybe that it would be better to include an item 8 that includes habitat restoration, if the council would be willing to include that, was something that came to mind.
Is that in the pros plan where you want the change, or is that
Yes,
in our
that's
goals?
it's in the pros plan. It's on page 30. It's the page that has propelling Kenmore upward. The following 7 goals represent the direction that Kenmore strives toward the park, open space, and recreation system. So including habitat restoration in those, adding one more goal related to habitat restoration is something that I would like to see.
Council in agreement with that change? Councilmember Curtis?
So in general, I think that this is a process we've been working almost a year. We've had a lot of input from the public, from the Planning Commission, from the staff, and the council. And we do have a deadline. And I don't think doing last-minute wordsmithing is really the best way to manage this big issue. We have indeed raised climate into our number 3 priority, but we don't have the plan yet. That's what we're going to work on this year. So to take a future work product and start applying that to stuff we've been working on last year just seems like that's out of order. I think this has had adequate input from everybody who needs to have input. I'd be more in favor of passing this as it is, and then once we have a climate plan over this next year's work, then we can start applying it to any area we choose. So I would not be in favor of making any last-minute wordsmithing or other changes to this document.
Councilmember Marshall?
I'd be in favor of Councilmember McCain's proposed change. It doesn't seem like it's it doesn't seem inconsistent with anything that's reflected there, and seems consistent with our goals and easily accomplished, in terms of at least changing that wording.
Councilmember File?
I propose that we adopt Councilmember O'Kane's recommendation. In fact, we could adopt it as a revised wording and amendment today. I think that's just a motion that needs to be made.
Deputy Mayor, any comments?
I'm not opposed to adding the proposed change here. I am a little, this is, like Councilmember Kerr said, this is something we have been working on, and this was something that I thought we had pat and we were ready to go. And from a process standpoint, I'm not thrilled at reopening a document after we've had 2 council meetings and a year's worth of planning commission meetings about it. The public had plenty of time to weigh in at different places. We've had at least 2 council meetings where we've already discussed this. I'm not opposed to the change, but just from a process standpoint, I would not encourage this type of behavior ongoing.
Councilmember Shrevenick?
Conceptually, I'm in agreement. I guess my issue is I think, although, I mean, this kind of came at the last minute, so I haven't had time to study Appendix F, and maybe Ms. Bent can point us to because I think it is in here, the whole section on habitat restoration. I'm just kind of struggling to find it.
It is in there. I can look through it and find it. And the other thing that we did in the agenda, Bill, we did highlight the areas in the pros plan by page number where restoration of critical areas is specifically mentioned. So it's going to take me a little bit of time to kind of flip through. I know it is there in Appendix F. I just hadn't tabbed it.
Is there any other Councilmember O'Kane?
Yes, I do have another question, and it is related to public comment, and I realize that we've been working on this for over a year, but I think it is fair to ask the question because it was posed today during citizen comment, asking about including passive use in the plan, passive use of our open parks and open recreation spaces. I would like to, Ms. Bent, you had provided some information related to that earlier today. Would you be willing to share that?
I can only do one thing at a time.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm so sorry.
I have the thing in front of me which is in regard to participation rates. And it was brought forward again during public comment and a request to include it, particularly to include participation rates for camp routes for the Wilderness Awareness School and the nature walks at Wallace Swamp Creek Park, that those be added to the pros plan. It's certainly possible that we could add that information, but when we were looking at what participation rates to include in the PROS plan, we did not include all of the activities for programming in the city. In fact, the paragraph cited also says participation rates in Kenmore are available primarily for youth soccer and baseball, rowing and hand carry watercraft sports, and aquatics. And these are also programs that have high known participation rates and also a need that generates demand for new facilities such as sports fields, a boathouse, and a pool, for example. The paragraph cited in the plan also notes that data should continue to be tracked and updated from participating organizations where available. We provided data in the plan for youth sports, rowing, water sports, and aquatics, again, because they involved a large number of people on a year-round basis. The plan notes that youth sports serve approximately 850 Kenmore residents, and rowing and water sports serve more than 2,000. If you also include the concession rental for paddleboarding. And aquatic facilities historically have served 60,000 to 75,000 participants throughout the North Shore area. When you look at the participation rate for the nature walks, it was at 42, so it is relatively low. And again, these kind of facilities, whether it's the nature walks or camp routes or the wilderness awareness school, are available to be accommodated within existing facilities. It doesn't generate the need for new facilities. And there are other examples that we could cite. For example, we did not include the activities like Skate Like a Girl, which is a skate camp held at the skate court out here. Again, because it can be accommodated in an existing facility. Similarly, the Skyhawks at Rhododendron. We did reach out to camp routes today. When the EIS for the ball field was going forward, in that scoping document, there was a note that there were between 270 and 480 participants over the year using the ball fields for a couple of hours a day over the 6-week summer session and 10 weeks during the school year. Camp Routes emailed us and noted that in 2019 there were 622 children participated in the programs. But they were not able to tell specifically how many were Kenmore residents. The Wilderness Awareness School was another example that was asked to be included in the document, and they used St. Edward State Park as one venue for their activities, and they responded to us that they had over 600 participants in their program, but again could not tell us if those rates were, how many of those participants were Kenmore residents. So again, I think what I'm trying to say here is that there needs to be sort of a balance of what is and is not included, and that was sort of the rationale for what was included. It was those things that had known high participation rates, and particularly those that had a high participation rate with a need that generated a demand for a facility. So that's the rationale, but again, if council direction is to include some or all of those passive recreation activities, we're happy to do so.
I really appreciate the detailed explanation, Ms. Bent. And I would say it's probably very clear based on the high use of the park that passive recreation is a highly known and visible use, as it does have 700,000 visitors per year. So it's the number 3 visited park in the state. I really thought it was important to call awareness to the reasoning that it's not included in the plan, and I appreciate your time to put that together. I did have, I think, one more piece to cancel. Number one, I just want to share, I have not been working on this plan for a year. I have been reading it, and I'm learning my role as a council member. I feel it is my responsibility to call out questions before approving plans and information such as this. So I want to make sure that it's clear not to expect this for every plan that has been out to the public for a year. But I will ask questions, and if they come at the last moment and I find they are significant, I promise to ask them, because it is in service of our community. We are living in a time, and I may be a broken record, but attention to climate and habitat restoration are a top priority. And if we can, in any time, draw more clarity towards the city's priority on those issues, I will advocate for that. So I appreciate the time. I want to also thank the Planning Commission that is not here for all of their diligence and hard work on this, all of the citizens who have participated in this process. I also, and those who have really taken time to come to public comment since I've been on the council to raise their questions. It's really helped me to have a better understanding of the decisions that we are making here on behalf of our community. If council would be okay with adding the amendment of adding a number 8 towards habitat restoration, if we can have a motion and second on that. I don't know the rules on guidance, Mayor, so forgive me for
Go ahead
jumping.
and make your motion.
I'd like to make a motion to add item 8 related to habitat restoration on page 30 in the pros plan.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk, is there any further discussion on this? Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking through the Appendix F, trying to figure out where these things were covered, because, again, I don't have any problem with the idea. I just don't want to be duplicative. And they are covered, there's a couple of items on page 320, specifically LU 1534, maintain fish and wildlife through conservation and enhancement of terrestrial, air, and aquatic habitats. 1536, designating protect fish and wildlife habitats of importance, has some detail under that. And then all of page 321, LU 15311 through 16, really deal, and including 15315, which calls out WIRA 8 in particular. So it feels like it's pretty covered. I mean, when I look at the comments and kind of crosswalk them, it talks about, protecting habitats within capital improvement projects whenever feasible, promote voluntary fish and wildlife habitat enhancement projects by private individuals and businesses through educational incentives, protect salmonid habitats specifically on 15311. I mean, again, conceptually, I have no problem with it. It kind of feels like it's already there. So that would be my only comment. And maybe
Curtis.
talk about how they relate to each other, the pros versus the natural element.
Councilmember Curtis.
Did you have a comment first?
Thank you, Councilman Shrubnik, for finding those sites. And there are probably other ones as well in that natural environment element of the comprehensive plan. So again, this is a policy document, and all the elements kind of work in tandem together. So just because it isn't specifically cited in one doesn't mean it doesn't apply. It is specifically cited in the natural environment element in specific detail. So just because it isn't cited in the pros plan doesn't mean to say that salmon habitat restoration will not be considered in capital projects or in park development going forward. That would not be the case, because the natural environment also has to be considered when you're planning a park. So all elements are equally important.
Councilmember Curtis.
And that was this sort of the comment I was going to make, that the pros plan by definition is park, open space, and recreation. So that's the focus of this piece of our plan. And I understand that lots of element of climate, not just salmon restoration. To take one piece of climate plan and put it in here when it's not specifically needed, I think it is covered in other areas. And the climate plan will be a big deal. It'll have to do with trees and all sorts of pieces. And I just don't think we should stray from the focus: park, open space, and recreation. That's what this piece is our focus for now.
Councilmember O'Kane?
I would like to just clarify a bit on that, and that is our Parks and Recreation Plan does speak to the high priority, I think the top priority of Kenmore residents of natural spaces, and restoration and maintenance of our natural spaces is a top priority statistically verified in our community. And when looking at page 30, where I'm talking about the number 7, it says the following 7 goals represent the direction that Kenmore strives for toward the park, open space, and recreation system. In that, I think being specific, using the words habitat restoration in those priorities by adding a number 8 would be a benefit to the plan. Thank you.
All right, any further comments? Councilmember File.
I can see Councilmember O'Kane's viewpoint here and why it might be important to Kenmore and our future of salmon species throughout Kenmore. If left unspecified, it could kind of fall anywhere. I think that being explicit here would be a benefit, and I don't think it's a harm. I think that this is a reasonable ask, especially given the change in our goal set from our council retreat. Therefore, I would recommend adopting the motion to add a line 8 to this plan, and I'd be happy to say further that we should adopt that motion with an edit to go ahead and continue and supplement this forward, so that we don't have to have it come back yet again, if we all agreed on the wording.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
I have a thought on how to bring these together, and I want to run it past staff to see whether it's even a possible thing. So if we add just the goal, we wouldn't have, I mean, unless we did a lot more work, we wouldn't have kind of objectives and policies underneath it, because we'd have to make those up. I'm wondering whether if we add a goal statement, we could kind of underneath that kind of reference as the objectives or the policies, the natural element ones.
Right. In fact, that's what Maureen, who was the Parks Project Manager, was just sort of whispering in my ear, is if there was a way to kind of put sort of an objective or something under goal number 7 and add that to the document rather than creating a new goal number 8.
Anybody else? Councilmember Curtis.
I guess that was another one of my concerns. Usually you start from your highest level of, vision and goals and all those sort of things, and then your document flows logically from those things you believe in. So to put something in at the beginning, say we're going to believe in a new thing, and then not go through your whole document and make sure it aligns with that, it just seems like the wrong process for something this major, unless you are willing in the next week to go through the whole document and get some alignment so everything flows with the new number 8 goal.
Right. I think if you had a standalone goal, then definitely you would have to have policies and things to support it. And to me, that then is getting into more of a substantive change, needing more discussion, and would probably likely rise to the level of a public hearing. And the city attorney is nodding over there. So it's not that it can't be done, but I think if you were adding a goal, then that is a significant change and would warrant that ripple effect to make sure that there are other things supporting that goal directly. So I think it can be done. It will take more time to do that if that is council's direction.
And just to make sure you all understand what Debbie's talking about, each one of those goals on page 30 is a section in the PROS plan. So goal number 1 on page 30 is goal P1 on page 31. And then, so P1 has multiple policies and paragraphs under it. So it would be kind of weird to have goal 8 and then nothing under, no policies and goals under goal 8. Does that make sense?
Ms. Colaisi, do you have
Yeah.
something
Is
about
it
that?
okay to speak to council about this since I was
Yes.
part of writing this document? The goals are supposed to be aspirational, and they're supposed to be at a level where what we want to achieve. So habitat restoration is a means to getting to a higher level protection of the environment, having the environment be actually already cared for so that we're not having to renovate it and improve it. What the term restore natural habitat or do restoration is an action, and that would be under a policy, under a goal. So if the goal is to protect the environment, then what you're suggesting is actually more of an action that you take to achieve the goal. So that would be a policy level addition, which we can do easily and focus on the policy to actually achieve the goal, which goal number 7 is what you're trying to get to, protecting the natural habitat.
So goal P3 is preserve, maintain, enhance built and natural environment to ensure quality recreational opportunities exist. I'm having a hard time.
What page is that?
That is page
32.
32.
Yeah, so if you go to the bottom of page 32, you'll see objective P3.1.
So you can kind of see how things go from, as Maureen was describing, something which is very broad as a goal, and it kind of narrows down as you get through the objectives and policies. I think that in terms of the goal for habitat restoration would be more appropriate in the natural environment. If there is a way to add a policy or tweak one of the policies under an existing goal might be less of a major change. Having to create those words and where to put it on the spot now, I'm not prepared to do that. But if that's what council decides to do, I'd certainly be happy to bring that back on February 24th, along with any other changes that council wants to make to the plan.
May I? Oh, I'm sorry. I want to really thank you both for the explanation. I want to thank council for their comments on this as well. I think that I'm not asking for a major tweak. I was picturing something more minor, adding the habitat restoration verbiage to make sure that it's just clearly written, because it's different than enhance. Preserve, maintain, enhance. There's a separate step of restore.
Correct.
So I was not asking for a grand plan into this, because we will be doing other things, but I did want to call attention to it. So thank you.
So again, I'd like to offer to council that if there is a direction, we could certainly look at looking at a policy under an existing goal. We could certainly bring that back if that is council direction. We can certainly bring back any other changes as well, whether it's including passive recreation rates or whatever it is. But I think it would be better to bring any changes back at a future meeting rather than try and do those now. So again, I'm waiting for council direction.
All right. Councilmember Shrubnik?
I'm with what staff says. I mean, it does look like there's kind of low-hanging fruit there with P318. Identifying resource management agencies, could e.g. WIRA 8. I mean, there's some easy places to insert language, and 313 habitat restoration could easily include salmonid, and so I think probably I look to you to figure out some language, but it does seem like it might not be too heavy of a lift.
Right. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Shrubnik. I think P3.1, adding policy or 2 in there makes more sense than adding something to the vision statement. So I think I would support that.
All right, so we have a motion on the table.
Do we have a motion on it? That was my question.
The motion is still on the table.
Okay. To add a number 8.
Yeah, to adding
Oh.
number 8. So if there's no further discussion on that item, then if the clerk will please take the roll. This is on adding number 8.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
No.
Councilmember Curtis.
No.
Mayor Baker.
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
No.
Councilmember O'Kane.
No.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
No.
Motion fails 6-1. All right, now, let's come back to the issue of doing something around 3.1. Is that something you want to bring back to us and can bring back to us in a timely fashion so that we don't have to go to the state and ask for delays?
I'd like to bring that back on February 24th, please.
I'm sorry?
I would like to bring it back on February 24th,
Fine.
if that is council's direction.
Is there any disagreement with that? Councilmember Curtis?
I'm in favor of leaving the document as it is.
Yeah, comment.
Debbie Bennett, I just want to thank you for all your hard work on this plan. And I thank you for taking the time to listen to us tonight and consider the addition. I know it's an incredible amount of work that you and your team have put through. And we appreciate the forward work you're going to do to make this amendment. So thank you for your endless hours of hard work.
Thank you.
So I tend to agree. We've had a lot of public input on this, and I'm a little hesitant to go to change what we've presented to the public and add lots and lots of input on. But we go with council's direction. So is there a motion then to add something? Councilmember O'Kane?
I'd like to make the motion to add the amendment as discussed by Ms. Bent, by staff, to include habitat restoration in 3.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Councilmember Shrevenick?
It's just a question. By bringing it back on the 24th, I think Mayor Baker also asked, does that put us into a delay with the state or not necessarily?
What I will do is I will probably still write a letter to the state saying that it's being brought forward now on the 24th for action, but maybe asking for that extension just so we've got all our bases covered just in case.
Okay.
All right. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none. The clerk, please take the roll on going with staff's suggestion on a fix.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis.
No.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 6-1. If you could please bring this back to us on the 24th so we can
Yes.
move it forward.
Yes.
So the question then becomes, so we don't go, so we do it properly. Do we want this on the consent agenda, or is this something that we want to go discuss again? Consent agenda? Consent agenda, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is business agenda, walkways and waterways, park project update in Log Boom Park. Ms. Gleisi and Ms. Bent.
Yes. Good evening, Council. So we have Maureen Kalaisi, who's the Parks Project Manager for both Log Boom Park and Squires Landing Park, and we have Shane Phillips, who's with Mott MacDonald, who is leading the consultant team working on this project. We're here this evening to give you an update on the status of the project. We're at 60% level design. When we were last here in February 2018, we're at 30% design. So as projects move forward, things get refined. You did also discuss the budget during passage of the CIP later last year. So again, this is sort of prefacing a public open house, which is scheduled later in February. So we wanted to kind of tell you what we're going to be presenting to the public, tell you what's changed in the design, and sort of give you what's also changed in the budget at a very high level. So we're not really asking for any direction this evening. This is a presentation, and we're happy to take any questions. The presentation is divided into two parts. We'll start with log boom. We can answer questions as we go along, or we can, when we get to the end of the log boom presentation, we can take questions then before we move into Squires Landing Park. So that's all I've got to say, and I'm now going to turn it over to Maureen and Shane. Thank you.
Our preference would be so that we can make sure that the last agenda item over there has an opportunity to be heard tonight, that we hold questions until our QA period before we engage in the dialogue. Is that okay with the council? Thank you. I'd like to introduce Shane Phillips with Mott McDonald. He has been instrumental in working with us since the very early conceptual stages in the Imagine Kenmore process, where we have been developing these plans to build these projects. I am going to not delay, and we'll get moving on our presentation.
Okay, yeah, thanks for having the opportunity to come and give a briefing tonight. So what we're hoping to do is give a little bit of project background, kind of how we got to where we're at, and then focus a little more on where we're at right now, and then also what the next steps are on both projects. So starting first with log boom, and as Maureen mentioned, we'll go through an opportunity to ask some questions at the end of that, and then we'll step into Squires Landing. So again, kind of going back, background is help work with the city and the community on developing some concepts early on in 2015, 2016. A lot of community outreach, stakeholder involvement to try to define what types of things would people like to see as part of the Walkways and Waterways program improvements at the two sites. And so at Log Boom, that included access to the water, public use areas, and habitat enhancement were the messages we heard, and kind of a common theme for both the project sites. So that was 2015, 2016, and then after that was approved, we moved into a second phase of the project, which was focused on what we're saying a 30% level design, and that's when we're going through in a lot more detail, collecting more information, refining the concepts, doing more public outreach, working with regulatory agencies to better define and refine those design concepts, to then put together the permit application documents to initiate permitting for the project. And then that was done about a year ago. We completed that 30% design phase. Last fall, I think it was around actually in August, we started the 60% level design that then will move towards the final design. That's where we're at right now, is the 60% level design, and then that will move into the public open house later this month. So right now, as part of that 60% design is, we did a site assessment, and we had the whole project team, steady staff come out and stake some of the project areas. So both at Log Boom and Squires is some of the features we wanted to have it surveyed in so we can see it out in the field, not just on paper, but see it in the field. That really helps visualize what it's going to look like and provides an opportunity to do some refinements of the design then. We also did value engineering, looking at different types of materials with a close focus on cost estimates and what's it going to cost to do these, and then a constructability assessment as well, which is important to understand how will this have an effect on the use of the park during construction, but then also being mindful of construction cost for getting the work done. And so we're wrapping up that 60% design right now, and part of the meeting tonight, and then the public outreach will be part of that, and then we'll move to a 90% design after that. So what you see here is the original 2016 concept plan, and so I'll just kind of walk through that. Can I
Sure.
use this?
It doesn't. Yeah.
Can everybody see that on their screens, the cursor? Okay. So coming into the park, this is the existing parking lot here, and of course this is the public access pier over here. And so there's a lot of natural areas, wetlands in these various areas. That's what the green areas are. And so the original concept was working around what those existing wetlands were. with a focus on enhancing those, but then extending the public access out into here, into this orange areas would be the trail network. A little promenade here and a boat rental building, a constructed beach, and that's the component to get people out to the water. And then that would also be a launching area for people that take hand carry boats, whether it's paddle boards or kayaks and things like that, either that they bring in themselves or that could be rented from the concessionaire. There's a continuation of the trail that then eventually loops back into the Burke-Gilman Trail, some lookout areas, picnic pavilion. And so that was the concept in 2016. That concept is very similar still today, and I'm going to walk through a series of these. This is the 30% plan, as I mentioned, that was part of the preliminary design for the permit application development. And so you can see here, the parking area here, existing playground, existing restroom, and then transitioning into where the kind of promenade plaza area. This is the boat rental building here. The beach is here, and the picnic plaza pavilion is here. A continuation of that trail in through here to connect back into the existing Burke-Gilman Trail. One thing to point here is this is the property line between the City of Kenmore Park property line and the King County right-of-way. That became an important feature between the original concept and this concept, was to make sure all the improvements were going to be on the City of Kenmore property. And so that became part of a constraint to squeeze in as many of these features as possible, but still allow for enhancing some of the habitat features here, which would be enhancement of these wetlands along here and some of these other locations here. So one other refinement we had was reducing the number of access points. We had, I think, 3 or 4 before, and we reduced that down to 2. That came through the consultation with regulatory agencies, wanting to make sure that we maximized on-site enhancement of the nearshore area. And then there was also some habitat enhancement proposed over in this area as well. There's some riprap along the shoreline that some of the agencies wanted to see improved. And so this is a 60% plan. You have to look pretty close to see what the differences are. It's generally the same. That site assessment where we were staking out in the field resulted in some slight realignment of this walkway here. But in general, a lot of the features are very similar as what was in a 30% design.
And part of that reassessment was to try to save trees from being impacted.
One thing I should note here before we move on, make sure I get my numbers right. So the beach is around 4,800 square feet. So it's a pretty sizable beach. And one of the things we did in this phase here was we did a fairly detailed coastal engineering analysis, which was looking at, what are the wave conditions, and to ensure that this beach could be built here and be resilient and sustainable long-term without a lot of maintenance.
Speaking to that, there's some sample sand that we have here if you want to see some of that, but I would suggest we wait until after our presentation.
So this, getting into a little more detail here with respect to the habitat protection and enhancement features. So I mentioned some shoreline enhancement along this section here, avoiding and minimize any impacts to wetlands, but actually enhancing of those areas, putting in fencing along some of these areas to separate the uses where public access is and protect the habitat, and then enhancing wetlands in other areas. There is some additional habitat enhancement requirements. There wasn't enough area on this site, and so there's going to be some additional enhancements done over at the Squire site right along Swamp Creek that you see here. I think there's 300 to 400 feet of near bank enhancements there. That's both a combination of some enhancement work needed for the Squire site and then some for Log Boom.
Speaking of just the constraints to the site, the entire park site is within a wetland buffer. And so that's one reason why we were trying to do as much habitat restoration on site as possible and shoreline stabilization, because it's a very sensitive site and has been for a long time. Wetland A and all, well, I should state, all the wetlands that equal about an acre of the 3.9 acres, actually it might be a little more than 1 acre, are being preserved, not impacted. And there is no dredging that's occurring on the site to develop the beach.
And so as part of getting into some of the details of the different components, this gives some visuals of what some of these different elements look like. This is a architectural rendering of the current status of the design of the boat rental building, and I'll show a little more detail on that in a few slides. Example of what the pathway will look like, a concrete plaza, example of kind of the beach prototype, but in this case, the plaza will come right up to the edge of the sandy beach. Picnic pavilion, this is being consistent with some of the other types of infrastructure you see at some of the other park facilities in Kenmore. On the beach is both a resilient front beach that's more gravel, but the back beach is going to be sand that connects right into the plaza and pavilion area. And then again, just to focus on water activities. And so this is a cross-section through the beach and then up through the picnic shelter and pavilion area and part of that promenade. So what you can see here is this is at the high lake level. This would be imported gravel fill that's put in place, and then sand beach back behind here. As you move through the site, the sand beach area gets much wider, so it was quite an expansive area for kids to play in and things like that. So, and then the boat rental building, this is some renderings and details of where that's at in the current design. And so the focus is really on having some consistency again with other infrastructure at other city parks, but with being mindful of cost and future maintenance. And so one of the things is having a CMU base, but then, so that's this lower part, and then batten board on the upper part, roll-up doors, steel overhang as well. That kind of helps with keeping water out, and the aluminum canopy. So with being mindful of being on the water and minimizing maintenance long-term. So all that kind of packaged together, where are we at on costs? Like I mentioned, that we've been refining the design, the details, looking at constructability. So right in line with where the last check-in last fall was with the council on the budget. So we're slightly under budget. And so as we progress the design into the 90%, we'll have a lot more detail at that point. We'll check back in with the council again at that time prior to putting any final bid documents together before going out to construction. So here's the schedule and next steps. Open house being later this month. There are 60% design finalized in early March. Then we're going to be applying for the building permit. So the land use and environmental permits are in process. We hope to have those in place here later this year. But the building permit process will be initiated at the completion of the 90% design. And so with estimated permits coming in the summer, then they would have that check-in with the council on the budget. That would be this summer as well. And then currently, the plan would be to go to construct or bidding and then construction this fall. That's all predicated on the permits coming in this summer.
And we have received the city's land use permit and the Army Corps of, the Department of Ecology's acceptance on that.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
This is really awesome. This is great that they're showing this schedule ahead of schedule. So we told the voters end of 2023 when they voted back in 2016. And this is wonderful, and hats off and applause to you guys for being ahead of schedule. However, officially, to the public in our materials, I still want to say 2023 because this is dependent on other agencies. There's still tons of things here that are beyond our control. And so I still want to continue to under-promise and over-deliver. So please don't take this to the bank because the agencies haven't fully weighed in. The tribe hasn't fully done all their comments. And I'm still saying officially out there that it's end of 2023. So, can I also add one more thing?
Yeah.
So, Maureen mentioned the sand. So, for the sand, there's really only one test for the sandy beach that matters to me anyway, and that is, can you build a sandcastle? And so many months ago, they brought me this sand, and we went in, we filled a little cup full of water and put the sand in it and made a sandcastle, and 4 months later, the sand castle is still standing. You can pass it around.
We have one more slide before we'll go to questions, and thank you for doing that, passing it out.
I thought the evaluation of sand was putting your toes in the sand.
Me too.
So as that goes around, we'll just kind of talk a little bit about being prepared for construction if that were to occur earlier than the end 2022 going into 2023. So we have already looked at how we would be dealing with construction, and we have a slide here that shows you that the staging area is necessary for the contractor to access the west side of the park. He really needs that space, so the parking lot would be closed, and it would basically allow for the construction access to the west side of the park where all the work is mostly being done. And as you can see, as it goes around the restroom, it's a very tight squeeze, and so that's another reason why that the restroom and the playground cannot be open during construction, because they would be putting our community in potential risk of something bad happening with our construction site. So we are planning to close those things for construction. The route to going to the pier would be open for the most part, except for an infrequent time period where it would be down so that we can do restoration of wetland A on the left-hand side of the screen there. And we are planning to accommodate restrooms for users of both the trail, because that's a primary location people would come to use the restroom, and for anyone coming to still be able to access the pier. With that, we are open for question and answer.
Councilmember Marshall?
Where is the sand from?
That's a good question. We reached out to a couple different suppliers, Cal Portland being right here in town is one, and then there's some others closer up to Everett. So it would be sourced here somewhere in the Snohomish County, North King County area.
Hasn't been decided yet then where we're going to get it.
No, what we'll do is specify some of the requirements, not only the size, but some of the important characteristics of the type of sand, and then the contractor would need to meet that specification.
And the really key thing to remember on both the gravel that would go into the water and any sand that we're using on the beach is so that it is maintainable. We do not want it to wash away. So we have to come up with a gradation of that material so that they stay in place. And that's the important reason why we have to specify the size of the material. And the fact is that there's another example that you can see, and we'll have this for the public open house as well. So if you'd like to come and review things a little more closely, is that we used our existing sand at our current park as the source for understanding what that granular makeup needs to be on the size of the material.
Councilmember Curtis.
So I like the changes that you're continuing to make, and I think our citizens are going to be really excited that this is going to be one of those parks that's going to get them to the water.
Councilmember File.
This is just really exciting to see this project coming along. It's really enjoyable to see how it may appear in the future. And with all of our hopes and dreams in alignment, I hope that this comes to be a great venue for our community to come enjoy. I certainly hope it turns out just the same as is pictured here. So.
Councilmember Srebnick.
I am super excited about this after about 20 years of advocacy on this. I applaud the sand that can make sand castles coming from a sand carving family. That's really exciting. And I did have one question, and that is on I think it's called the Waterfront Promenade. It was emailed as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, currently, there is a paved path that comes off of the trail into the park on the west side. So is this replacing that? I mean, can you kind of
Sure.
tell me a little bit more about that?
I believe this is about the access point to the beach right now. So the reality is the concrete stops here and an asphalt path goes the rest of the way. So the concept of the promenade is that you're actually coming around on the front side of the building all the way to this picnic shelter is the concrete promenade. And then we tie back into the asphalt path here. But it's all being redone because the reality is the existing asphalt that's out there is not in great shape. You know it if you rode your bike on it. So it needs to be replaced. And one of the reasons why it's going to stay as asphalt is that because concrete will do more disturbance. It will actually probably give way more to roots than the asphalt, which is why we transitioned to asphalt in that section of the park.
Councilmember O'Kane?
I really am excited about this project, and thank you for your presentation. This is really exciting work, and I'm very excited about the habitat restoration, which obviously you've been here listening to me talk about it. So thank you for your diligence and work on this.
Well, we're excited for that as well.
So that asphalt path there that you're talking about, is that still going to come off the Burke-Gilman?
Yes.
So that's going to be bike traffic?
Well, we're hoping that it'll slow because we're going to probably put in a few, like, I guess it would be like speed bump almost, but not like we're going to hash or what do you call it when you
Calming.
cut? Yeah, we're going to cut a line through the asphalt to try to give bicyclists an idea they're coming into a different environment. And the idea was that we're going to try to have a lot of activity along here, so it really forces a bicyclist to slow down. And I would also enforce that we're going to probably need to put some signage up that asks them to get off their bike, just like in Bothell, when you're in the main park there with the trail, Sammamish Trail, that they say get off your bike to go cross the bridge. We'll be probably wanting to add that in the park system here to encourage bicyclists to get off their bike so that they're not putting themselves or someone else in jeopardy of being hit.
I guess I'm a little bit concerned, certainly around the 4th of July with the bicyclists and the way they come flying down the trail, to have that branch off to a beach where we have little kids running and playing. I'm kind of hesitant there.
Well, we certainly can, at a special event, make different decisions on how we handle that path. But traditionally, it's been part of the process for the Burke-Gilman, and we felt it was sort of important to still maintain that as a project, and makes a transition back to the Burke-Gilman a lot easier. But certainly, at a special event, the city could make a different decision on how to handle that entrance point.
So I think the short answer is that yes, it's important to have that connection, especially for pedestrians, and for cyclists maybe to consider more for safety and looking at that potential conflict between peds and bikes, and where it's appropriate to have signage or not allow people to be riding their bikes. So I guess the final answer is we don't know yet, but we'll certainly take that into consideration.
I know seniors are very hesitant to walk on the trail, especially in summer, because the bicyclists just fly down there, and I'm just worried about them being that close to the sandy beach where we have little children playing, especially if you can't convince them to.
Maureen, would you mind pointing out where the Burke-Gilman Trail path is? Yeah. It's up there. So that's where the Burke-Gilman Trail is. Right. And the connection into the park is this separate trail.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and then just as a little bit of effort that we did to try to keep a separation of bicyclists wanting to get access to the restroom, is kind of having them be able to go behind the boat rental building so that they're not on the front side. So we're going to have to do a little work on signage to encourage that.
But that trail is a good way to come off the Burke to go to the restroom.
Yes, that's been the historic. In fact, this trail, at one time was all of the county's property.
Right.
So that's why that route has existed historically, is because it was their route to get to the Tracy Owen station back in the 70s when it was built.
The restrooms, yes.
Yes.
Other questions?
Okay, we'll move
Okay.
on.
Move on.
I'm going to have to fast forward real quick here. Just give me a few minutes. Okay, Squires Landing.
So maybe we can move through this a little quicker. It's a very similar process that we followed on Squires Landing with kind of the approach, what we heard from the public, what we've incorporated into the concept designs that went to voters and approved, and the 30% level design. Same thing, just a much bigger site and a lot more other improvements and opportunities. So similar progress and spot in the design. So currently working on the 60% and be wrapping that up in the next couple of months. So this was the original concept plan in 2016. And so Main Street, 175th over here, with access into the site being a parking lot up here, and this was 31 stalls, parking stalls, and then 6 trailer stalls, and a couple ADA stalls as well. We put that in this position because of there is a lot of there's some wetlands on the site, there's some critical areas and setbacks from that, and so this ended up being the position where we could put that. Trying to get as many parking stalls in there as we can, but given it's a large site, it's very constrained on where we could do that. So that's where the public access would be in first, is there. There's also a trail network in here, so you could come off the sidewalk, access into the site here along this trail that would connect down along the west side of the property. There's a pavilion down here. The existing float that's right off the Sammamish would be accessible there, and then access across the bridge across the lagoon. Coming back over here, there would be a restroom, trails coming down, a plaza that would be a launch, also a staging area for hand carry. The dragon boats, kayaks, canoes, things like that could all be accessible from folks bringing in the vessels in the parking lot. And then boardwalks that would be elevated above, because there's wetlands out in here, to be able to access out for viewing of wildlife and also getting access out over water and then out onto the peninsula. So after this was developed and approved, we went into a more detailed data collection, design, wetland delineation, survey, all that kind of work to better understand and the site conditions, and then refine the design. So in concept is very similar, but during the 30% design, we had a lot of consultation with the regulatory agencies, Muckleshoot Nation, the Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and through that, we came up with this revised, updated plan. And so a few major things that changed were, in the original concept, it showed a little connection between Swamp Creek and the lagoon here. Through discussion with the agencies, it was preferred to have just a wider opening here and have a single opening from a habitat perspective. So that was one of the changes. And then just some realignment of some of the trails to move around some of the wetlands, critical areas. As a result, we only had 2 access bridges then. The other one had 3 because of that other little lagoon connection. Still having access over into the peninsula, and then strategic areas for viewing points out across the river here, and then back across the site. And then we refined what the float system looked like for staging, so that there was access from the west side of the property, and then also over here where the plaza, where events could be held, and then access for folks that would be coming in with trailers or with their vehicles to offload and get access down here.
And with the wetland delineation work that we did here, we were able to refine where restoration would occur on the site. Just in terms of statistics, it's 1.5 acres of infrastructure improvements. That's the physical things that are on the site, and over 4.2 acres or more of habitat restoration on the site. And we're also maintaining on the peninsula side over 2 acres of restoration done by Adopt a Stream and Snow King Watershed Council. So that's also factored into this project.
And so this is the current concept design. The kind of yellow highlighted areas are where there's been some refinements. For the most part, everything else is virtually very similar to the prior one that we showed, but we refined the waterfront plaza size a little bit. We realigned this to stay away from some of the tree line here and some of the wetland enhancement areas, so there's not any conflict there. It also results in less maintenance long-term, not having needles coming down on the boardwalk, so that was a good improvement. And then some realignment along this edge too, just for pedestrian flow and ADA access and things like that was a better alignment. Nothing major though. Just a few numbers here on kind of where this is. So the plaza is around 3,100 square feet, so it's a pretty good size concrete plaza. The total length of boardwalk, so this is all elevated structures all the way out to the peninsula. There's about 1,600 feet of boardwalk, about 600 feet of trails. So that's these areas here.
When you say boardwalk, let's be clear on what boardwalk means. Maureen, do you want to explain what a boardwalk, what we mean by boardwalk?
Well, similar to the rhododendron park boardwalk that we built, it's more of, and I'll let you get into the details. Graded. It's required to be graded in order to protect salmon habitat, and in terms of how much light gets through, not only for salmon, but for our wildlife habitat in the water.
And all the structures, the gangway, the float, the boardwalk, and the bridges will all have graded surface, so light can go through all these structures and still have vegetation underneath.
And the only other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the design and what's important is the access to the peninsula. Not only was a request of the community to be able to have direct views to Sammamish River from the historic Squires Landing property, which is just to the east of the parcel that we purchased back in 2015. But it also is our a route for maintenance. We're going to be doing a lot of restoration and maintaining existing restoration at this site that we're going to need that maintenance access. Right now, it's really difficult to maintain anything on the other side of the peninsula of Swamp Creek.
So similarly, getting into some of the details here. So this is a photo here looking up Swamp Creek. I mentioned earlier there's some habitat enhancements here for migrating juvenile salmon along the edges and fringes of Swamp Creek. So that's both for log boom and for squires. So that's going to be along this section. And then there's a lot of invasives and other vegetation that needs to get repaired as part of the cleanup. There's some oversteeping banks. So that's going to be part of the project, is to reconfigure along the entire perimeter of the shoreline here and doing vegetative enhancements. And then wetland creation, of course, up in these areas, and then other wetland enhancements outside of that. And then vegetative restoration along the city street frontage as well, and then protection of some of that habitat as well with fencing. And so the focus on some of the amenities then that we were just talking about is for improving public access to water is really a focus on more simple, rustic, and modern type look. So kind of coming across here, the bridge is more of a bowstring bridge, so kind of a centerpiece, both bridges looking similar to that with weathered steel. This is the boardwalk. This one's shown over water, but it would be over the land portions of it. So some galvanized guardrail, handrail in some areas close to the higher elevations of the bridge, but then transitioning to no handrail with more of a bull rail at the base in the lower elevation areas. This is an example of the gangway coming off the plaza and the float. So you can see it's all fully graded. Pathways, walls with some cultured stone. Again, the picnic pavilion, very similar to what you see at Rhododendron would be proposed at Log Boom. And then the plaza, some of that having handrail as well, trying to tie that in aesthetically with some of the other features that you'd see on the site.
Yes, I have a question. If you could back up in the upper right corner, the galvanized walking trail that's in your upper right. well, how accessible is that to, somebody who's in a walker or navigating that bridge pass? I mean, I'm thinking about accessibility and people with mobility issues.
Thank you for bringing that up. We have addressed that, and I can let Shane talk to that.
Yeah, so we've gone through what the requirements and standards are for ADA accessibility to boating facilities, and so it will meet that for the slopes and width. And that one in particular will also have a wider, it'll be flared out on the sides for folks with boats to be able to more easily pass, but it will have handrail along the edge as well. So it will be ADA compatible.
Thank you.
Okay. And next.
And so this is a cross-section through the site, the peninsula over here, Swamp Creek, and then going through the upland to the picnic shelter area. So this just gives another representation of what this bowstring bridge would look like, transitioning into an area where there is some guardrail, and then transitioning to an area where it's just the lower bull rail. Again, trying to tie through the different features for kind of the aesthetics and material types throughout the site. And so again, just some examples down here of what these features look like. And the bowstring bridge here, and again, more of the boardwalk feature that's this portion. So back to costs, similar story based on what was reported in the past. The current design, we've checked that. We're in a very similar order of magnitude, slightly above at the present time, but we still have a lot of design and refinements yet to do. So the same thing as this progresses, get into more details and get that finalized, we come back to the council and give an update on where we're at on budget at the 90% design completion.
Can I add something? So in that budget, you have money for long-term maintenance of the mitigation work. Can you speak to that?
Yes, we estimated about $40,000 a year would be needed for 10 years to maintain the habitat enhancements and mitigation and restoration that we're doing at the site. And that is $400,000. And so we've allocated that, and it's included in our budget.
And I think we're going to need every penny of that, judging from what I've seen on that particular site, because we've had groups go out there and try to kill off the reed canary grass and plant natives, and that reed canary grass just pops right back, and you just got to keep beating it back, and it's going to be a fight for probably more than 10 years.
Yeah. So in terms of schedule, we are this schedule after the 60%, we're going to be diverting from the same schedule as Log Boom. Log Boom is going to hopefully progress a little bit more quickly, and this project will take a lot longer. So you'll see that in the schedule here. We anticipate getting permits sometime by spring of 2021, where we would hopefully be able to go out to bid that summer. It's a 2-year construction cycle. So if for some reason we are delayed into 2022, which it is possible because of the amount of environmental regulations that we're going to be looking at for this site especially, which would have us start in 2022 and then finish in 2023, more aligning to the schedule that we provided to the community when we went out to the bond measure.
Can you go back to one of the main site plan, just any one? Yeah, so can you speak to that stand of cedar trees? Show them where it is, and is it historic, or what's the deal with those cedar trees?
They're old cedar trees. I'm not sure how historic, but we have worked around those to ensure that they're preserved. And as I mentioned before, also keeping some of the infrastructure out from the canopy of those, because cedars do drop a lot of needles and over the course of time. So,
yeah, from time to time we get asked about those cedar trees. As you may know, the property lines are long, skinny parcels, and So that, what you see there is several parcels worth of property, and those cedar trees happen to land exactly on the property line. So, anyway, but they're big, and they're gonna stay, and we're not tearing them down.
Yep. And they're quite a sight to see, so we're trying to provide opportunities for people to view them off of the, boardwalk, and, acknowledge that they're a part of this site that we think is significant, and we want to make sure that they're part of the project. Okay, I think we're at question time period, so I'll just leave that up here in case people have questions.
Yeah, could you go to slide 22, please?
Slide 22. That one's not showing me. Okay, there you go. Sure, right there.
So actually going back to what Councilmember File was asking, on this one here, to approach the bridge, it appears there's only stairs. Is there any other
No.
way for somebody to?
Yes.
There is, so
Okay.
it's part of the design. You'll
okay.
see there's a ramp there in addition to the stairs.
So this is the ramp, it's ADA accessible, and then there's a shorter cut with stairs here, so it provides 2 access points to that bridge.
Super, thank you. And yeah, I'm really excited about this in particular. Like just that one little piece of property that we purchased a few years ago really opened up that area to the public in a way that we all knew it was going to be well used. We all knew it was going to be interesting, but I think just the amount of public involvement and the excitement that people have had for just that one little tiny piece that we've opened up has been beyond what we could have imagined when we purchased that piece. And what we're doing here is really ambitious, and people have said they want to get to the water. We are going to make it so easy for folks to get to the water here and really experience an area that, I've tried to hike through there before, and it's a tough hike. This can really open things up while still, I think, protecting some more environmentally sensitive areas. So I'm really excited to be able to get folks out into these areas and really experience it in a more meaningful way. So thank you for everything you're doing.
And thank you for bringing up the point with regards to the Tweed purchase, because that really was the instigating driver for this whole process, the Imagine Kenmore process. I think it really drew people to ask the question, how about this property? Why is it undeveloped? And what could we do here to provide better water access and improve the environment? The state of this site definitely needs renovation.
So on this diagram here, you have indicated boat storage over by the parking lot.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Could you repeat that?
Boat storage.
Oh, boat
by the
storage,
parking
yes.
lot.
Yes,
over by
sorry,
the parking
yes.
lot. The existing boat storage is down by the garage where it says existing parking.
Yep.
There has been 3 or 4 thefts where the current boat storage is. It looks to me like this is not as protected space as what is down below. I'm just worried about what kind of protection there is for boats.
Let me go through that. I'm sorry we didn't address it. It is going to be fenced, and it will actually have more of a little more, maybe if we can afford it, a little more. And actually, we were talking to KWAC as to whether they want to do any donation towards that fencing, or we might have a little bit of shielding from the front parking lot.
Yep.
So this side would be more shielded, and then the entire thing would be fenced and locked.
Okay.
But we would love the support of KWAC and doing any fundraising for it, because it is above and beyond what we had really identified for the project in the past.
Good. Thank you.
And also worth noting is the 3-car garage that's there at the Tweed property now, that'll still stay there.
Yep.
And so KWAC folks will be able to still drive down that easement and still use that boat storage area, but it just won't be for the public. It'll be more for hand-powered watercraft storage and utility access and things like that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Curtis.
Question on Lagoon. Right now, it's a great green slime place in the summer. So by making the entrance wider and with all the use, boats coming and going, will the green slime go away?
It may not fully go away, but the idea is that by opening the entrance, we will get better flushing through here and reduce the amount of that occurrence through the summer.
And we also have included as part of the project in long-term maintenance is to potentially the need for increasing the amount of aquatic weed removal that we're doing there as well.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yeah, and I'm excited about the expanded opening there too. It's not only good environmentally, but it's a lot more navigable. The question that I had is kind of related to what the city manager talked about, which is we've got a couple of redundant things going on, not completely redundant, but we've got 2 parking lots and 2 restrooms, and I'm just wondering what, are we signing the one that is, I guess, what is that, the west, the west route, and the rest parking for just KWAC? I mean, is there a delineation? Are they both totally public, and then also in the restroom?
Well, we're required to keep it open to the public, the
Okay.
one down on the west side, because it was purchased with Recreation and Conservation Office funding, and it's a requirement that the access to that site be open.
Okay.
However, the main signage and everything for the park will be up at the large parking lot and will be much more accessible and easy to get to. So, but we're not allowed to close off that access point. So if it fills, there's only like about 10 spaces that you can park there, then obviously someone will be turning around and going up and parking in the 30-plus parking lot. But I think you'll find that as soon as we build a better parking lot, it will be used. Probably more so than the one below.
Yeah, I was just thinking, maybe there's a thought to making, one of them the ADA, since it's already built for ADA. And I mean, that was just.
They're both going to have to
Oh,
provide ADA
yeah,
access.
okay.
So each site
Yeah.
there's an ADA one spot down at the small lot, and then there'll be more than one. I think there's at least
Right.
2 or 3
Okay.
up there. We're required to do
Okay.
that regardless.
And then the other question was about, there seems to be 2 restrooms almost back to back, but maybe I'm misreading this.
Only one built restroom. So the restroom structure will be right.
Okay,
Oh,
there's
sorry.
2, no, just back, the one you were on. I mean, it
This
says
is it.
restroom and washdown station, and then the other one says restroom and parking.
That says boat washdown station, but this is the restroom
left,
structure.
Left. Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
new restroom. So that's the structure right there.
Okay, it's just
It's
called
just
out
locating
twice.
it in 2
Okay.
places. It's the same restroom.
Okay, got it, okay.
It'll be such an improvement from the porta potty that we have down there now.
Any other questions?
Oh, we encourage you to come February 26th to the public open house, and there'll be more time to talk with our consultant team.
And you've probably already received an invite in the mail. The mailer went out to all Kenmore residents, so we're advertising this open house widely.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is staff report, 84th Avenue Northeast Simons Road intersection changes. Mr. Vincenti.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So we are looking to do some revisions to the Simons and 84th Avenue intersection. This is in relation to the overlay that we have planned on Simons from 163rd to 92nd. We had to do some reworking of the northwest corner, so we decided to take advantage of, since we had to tear out that part, take advantage and work on the other side to give it more of a squared-in intersection with 84th. We are providing for a narrow entry to focus folks at that one location, moving it slightly uphill and pushing it, or adding the sidewalk and whatnot to give people a better sight line. We've had some complaints about things being posted there on the grass on the edge, can't see, possibly moving a little bit further uphill to get better views, and so this solves that problem. The sidewalk is going to be 8 feet in front of Simon's, and then we're going to wrap around and connect with the existing sidewalk and put a little bit of light landscaping in that empty space in the middle of the northeast corner. It's going to be pretty low maintenance, a couple rocks and maybe a couple larger boulders and some tulips, bulbs, that sort of thing. So pretty low maintenance, and it'll be far enough back for clear zone requirements, so we're not too worried about that. I did want to address the comments that came in regarding why aren't we putting a signal there. In our comp plan, the transportation element that was approved in 2015 identified the intersection as a level of service C, which is fairly good service. And in actuality, the intersections at Juanita and 155th, which are signaled, were also rated at level C. So this one's performing as well as those two intersections when they have signals. Per our comp plan and per our code, it needs to be level service E or better. So it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and it's at the time that the transportation element was done in the comp plan, they did not identify any improvements that need to be done within the 6 or 7 to 20-year plan. They do have a note in there that says that some intersection treatments may be necessary as volumes grow, but based off of some our traffic data the last couple of years, the volumes aren't high enough to require any additional work there. I highly suspect that it wouldn't meet a warrant for a signal. But what we're doing there would not preclude us from building a signal in the distant future. So we could still install one at the appropriate locations and provide improved level service should it drop down to a point where a signal would be warranted. I would note that in 2021-22, we're going to be updating the transportation element of the comp plan. And at that time, we will be looking at future projects, and if the numbers show that it might need to have something, that might get into that plan, but currently it's not. So,
John, can you speak to the outreach that you've done to the community on this?
So last week we sent notices out to the property owners along Simon's from just downhill of where the overlay starts to the city limits. We've also hit the neighborhoods that approach Simon's and don't really have any other options. So for the most part, everybody down on by the high school and the Bothell residents that also live over there, we sent notices to those folks. We sent notices to folks just north of the high school, and we also hit the residents going down 84th, pretty much everybody that lives down in that lower area north of the intersection. So there were, I don't remember how many homes, but quite a few down there. And then we also hit a few folks south of the intersection and anybody that might have to actually be forced to get into the intersection. So we sent those notices out, pretty much the same thing that was brought in front of you. Those went out on the 4th and the 5th last week. And then we're at advertising right now, and we're expected to open bids on March 3rd. So. Oh, and I will say that during the West Sammamish Bridge Walkways and Waters open house, we did mention the overlay project to folks that were there as well too. So we didn't go into too much detail as the intersection, but we did tell them we were having a project.
Councilmember Fowl.
So I just had a question about the crosswalk areas. What I'm understanding in your report is that there's going to be flashing crosswalk signs on each side. Is that right?
So at the crosswalk just downhill from the intersection, there will be a brand new flashing beacon for crosswalks or for crossers. And then there currently is one uphill from 84th that's going to remain. Okay. So we'll have 2 at that location.
So part 2 of my question here is really a comment of concern. This area is really dark during the winter months and during the evenings. In fact, you know, as you are driving up this road, I guess that's south, you can't typically see somebody who's in the middle of the road in the crosswalk, in that upper crosswalk. Mm-hmm. So thinking about the safety of our community, has there been any thought to doing the lit crosswalk strip, you know, that the flashing little beacons that are on the actual crosswalk. I understand that police often recommend that as a safer alternative, or at least to bring more awareness to a person in the center of a crosswalk that's rather a dark crosswalk.
And I'm not aware of any studies that indicate that the in-pavement flashing is more or less safe than above-ground lighting. Of course, we do have the flashers for both, so if somebody hits that, that will flash, that will alert drivers that something's coming in the dark. It's fairly visible. My experience with the flashers is that they tend to be high maintenance. They typically will go out, and then it's very difficult to replace them, and you have to cut them out and whatnot. So that's been my experience with the flashers, but I'm not familiar with any study that says that they're safer than the above-ground ones.
Okay, so that leads me to part 3. Would improving the lighting in these areas help increase the visibility of mid-crosswalk to, that midpoint way? I am really rather concerned about this stretch of road and the fact that people do stop and they try to stop, and sometimes those kids run real good. So we've been lucky enough not to have an incident in this area, but it is dark.
And it is possible to install lighting at that intersection. We do have a grant right now to add lights to poles that don't currently have lights. And our traffic engineer, traffic engineer is looking to see where we can add some more because we have a little more funding. The big issue comes into play as to whether or not there's a pole there to attach to. If not, then we have to have Puget Sound Energy install a pole, which increases costs and whatnot. But it is something we can look into. I don't recall if we've done any lighting studies in that area to see if lighting is required. But I can definitely ask our traffic engineer.
I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I really appreciate you addressing the sightline issues for people going south on 84th. That's one we've all heard quite a bit about. And this looks like it might be a major improvement and hopefully make it easier for those folks as they are coming up a pretty steep hill there and cresting to get out of there. How wide, are we changing the lane widths at all on Simons, or are we keeping them where they currently are?
They're going to stay pretty much where they currently are. We are, don't quote me on this one, but somewhere around the school, we're going to be switching for bike lanes, and so there's 2 lanes going northbound, and it's going to become 1 lane. We will still have the left turn pockets. That won't change. There'll be some areas where we might have to do a modified share with bike and pedestrians, but there will be bike lanes going down to 93rd.
Okay, but the travel lanes are, what are they, 11, 12?
I believe they're 11 feet.
Okay.
I'd have to double check that.
That's fine. I was just curious. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
John, while you're up here, do you want to talk about an all-day event at the hangar that's coming up?
You beat me at it. I was going to do that as well. Just to remind council and the public, on Wednesday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., we're going to have a drop-in session at the hangar where folks can come in and they can get their questions answered or learn more about the West Sammamish River Bridge project, the Juanita Ped Bike Safety Project, and the 68th Avenue project. We will also have information regarding the overlay as well, too, and then some information regarding what's going on in Kirkland and Bothell. This is a follow-up to our open house that we had the other week, so that folks who missed that, they'll have an opportunity to come down and get more information from us. So we'll be sitting there waiting for folks to show up, so please show up.
All right, thank you. Cool. All right, comments, reports, initiatives. Councilmember O'Kane.
The first thing that I want to do, and I know she's not here, but thank Nadia Reyna Silver for drawing attention to the Black History Month proclamation. She prepared an eloquent resolution for us to consider, and I think it's very important for the city of Kenmore to declare Black History Month and celebrate it. I also wanted to thank everyone for their extra time this evening on the pros plan. I did have questions, and I genuinely appreciate it. So thank you, and I want to thank staff for all of their hard work and diligence in preparing it and responding to questions. So I just want to reiterate that. And I think I will let it go there. So thank you, everybody.
Councilmember Marshall.
Wanted to echo Councilmember Kane on Black History Month and thank whichever of the staff or whoever was involved in going after that resolution, which I think there's something already prepped, already are in there, so that's outstanding. Thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
Nothing to add?
Shrubnik.
Nothing to add.
File.
I just want to follow up and say I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to support Nadia Silver when she reached out and asking for the Black History Month recognition. And it was an honor to assist her a little bit with that resolution. She did a great job all on her own. Also, I'm going to be attending the Sound Cities Association PIC training meeting and the meeting that follows on Wednesday. And on Saturday, I've been invited to visit the Swamp Creek Habitat Restoration. Cap Roots is going to be awarding a few individuals environmental stewardship awards, and I'll be one of those lucky recipients, so it's a real true honor to be receiving the Lorax Award, which is really cute. But I think we're on a good track for our next meeting, so thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Nothing to add.
Along with Sound Cities, there is a dinner. Dow Constantine is the featured speaker on the 19th. If you can attend, Nancy Meehan can help you with that. Also, I've got a meeting down in Olympia tomorrow. I'm on the Shorelines Hearing Board, and there's a meeting down in Olympia to talk about the board functions. I've been assigned on 2 different cases so far this year. The other thing is, last year, the Senate voted on the $40,000 property tax exemption for seniors and disabled. And in King County, the maximum income you can earn, or the minimum that you can earn to get the deduction this year is $58,423. So if your income is below that, you can qualify for partial property tax reduction, and that is graduated down. So given the size of the incomes in this region, that'll be a welcome change to a number of seniors. So anyway, if there's no further items